I'll like, okay, I'm going to go to this meeting, totally get engrossed, and then totally ignore the pop-up, and I'm like, I missed it.
Yeah, and I don't know how I missed the pop-up because usually, you know, I rely on those regularly.
Yeah.
And,
It happens. Today's been one of those days like that.
Yes. Well, and that's the other thing is our process for getting things on the agenda without a dedicated mechanism for the city attorney to be wrapped in. Because like I'm used to, they're part of the reviewers to approve things. And so, like I wrote some ordinances and some code and it needed it to be, but I sent it to Tom and then pushed it to the agenda and then I had to go back in, pull it off the agenda, re-change stuff, put it back on, and anyway, I was just all in that.
I just approved one. That one was okay to approve?
And the signed one, it had already gone through, I think.
Okay, because there was only one today that I
Yes.
had.
But, so it was weird because I went back in after our meeting this morning, and the signed one wasn't ever in my queue.
Oh.
But Aaron pushed that one. So it could have been that when I approved his version, it pushed it on, but then that you didn't remember seeing it. It must have been just from last weekend.
Yeah, and it might have, here,
Yeah, because actually we need to check to make sure it's going on the agenda.
I need to cross-reference
Okay.
to the tentative agenda to see what's in the queue.
Okay. I can feel that over here. That's nice.
Can you?
You're like, let me point that a little bit more.
You left the bench over there.
I was say, it doesn't feel warm in here to me.
It's not as warm as it has been.
Yeah.
But
Feels good.
You might have been running around a lot.
I might have been running around a lot.
Maybe.
We got the bodies of it in here.
Where's skirt? Gosh, I'm miserable. This is like the worst outfit ever. No, oh my gosh.
It's not comfortable?
No.
Okay,
Not like
sorry.
I haven't worn this skirt for a long time. That's a very high-waisted
Oh.
skirt. So all day today I'm like, oh, like,
That's the style now.
yeah, don't like it. That's okay. I'll okay. And the mic's on.
That might be.
Okay. I should just open my bag now.
We should just open it.
Okay, here, I'll take one of yours, I'll replace the green one.
It's okay.
You can control your routine here. You don't believe now.
On the way home. I'm not there. Let me use my finger. Let me break it.
Oh, well, there you go. There's your green one. There's your green
No, I don't
reinforcement.
need it. I don't have any more tissue, so I use that in the bowl of tissue.
Oh.
Tissue's not.
Did you do that for yours?
No, I did it. I was being generous and I put cheese on fresh sliced
too was a finance one.
Yeah.
And so finance and clerks was at the same time. That's the only one I did that a couple of years ago in San Diego.
Was it good?
You know what? For me, it's definitely that higher level policy, big things that I'm like, and I needed more of the
Nitty-gritty.
nitty-gritty, so for me, it wasn't all that productive.
Yeah, yeah. That's why I like the planning topics, because it's good. So there's a national and a California one. The California is specific to us,
Yeah.
and there's so many, you can stay up here or you can get in the weeds, whatever you want.
Yeah, this one was definitely more of the legislative.
I was gonna say, the legislative update is the critical one every year, because they change so much every year, and without having an in-house attorney, I don't get those updates. That was,
Yeah. There's a really good one we used to do it every year. When I was down south, and it was with, who's the other big law firm? I'm understanding, you know what I said.
yeah,
But they do legislative updates every year, and so I always go to those. And it was a day long,
yeah,
and it was literally like, okay, boom, 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 and literally go, okay, these are police department updates, here's what he needs to know about, and here's who you need to send this one to. So it literally would go over all of them, and it would tell you which departments you need to send what to.
awesome.
Which that was really, really helpful. It was,
Yeah.
I wish I had everything the attorney's from. It's a big one, because they're up here like,
That's from Carter?
no. But Kathy, who's the other
Myers,
attorney firm?
Nave.
Who's the other attorney firm that REMIF uses, that we have like?
Liebert and Cassidy.
Liebert Cassidy, but
Okay, yeah, yeah.
theirs was the best legislative update I've ever attended. I would like, I'd probably look into that, and I would pay to go down to Southern California, wherever they are, to go to it. Because they were so good.
Yeah.
How long do you think class in Palm's gonna take?
For the interview part?
No, for the
Oh,
presentation.
I don't know.
Oh, no, right.
I didn't even think about it.
Only Andre could do that.
You guys got done fast. You guys got done fast.
We were done by like,
We
we were done by 5.
That's why he come walking through and I was like, you were supposed to
Oh.
be here.
Yeah, I'm on the phone.
Yeah, because.
I won't say that I was done before I walked in. I could.
Get shut.
Gosh, maybe I should go out and buy a mobile home just so I can get it re-roofed.
What are you doing? Oh, for that. You don't need the requirements. You don't need the requirements.
Yeah.
Come on. Oh, I know, I was sorry.
They're like mine.
We already got in to get her ears cut and found out that she's got 45% from one ear and 65 of the other.
For hearing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
See, Erica.
Yeah. My nameplate is stuck to my door with like double-sided tape, so it's good.
We can go get it off.
I was like, I'm not gonna bend and break it.
Then it would never fit in the slab.
Yeah, so like, it's not gonna work,
To use mine.
right? I don't know which one's better, having no name or having no.
No name is probably.
Yeah.
better.
Sir.
No.
How are you?
Right.
All right. Oh, that's okay. I know. Well, I'm glad to be part of it. Anything I can do. Seriously, anything you guys think I can help you, just let me know.
So, how many schools?
Really.
Good. No, I appreciate it. Like I said, just what I can to help get stuff done. It is mind-boggling sometimes.
Well, yeah, there's so many things, so many steps, so many. It's really an education.
Yeah, totally. It used to shock me. The paperwork part always takes significantly longer than actually building it.
Yeah.
And people make those jokes now, but it's true. By a long shot.
You know, I mean, we're going through this thing, budget-wise and everything, and we keep reviewing it. And we keep going. Wait a minute, we put this original budget together in 2015. And a lot of things have happened since then. You know, it's just unbelievable. But
You guys are thinking as soon as this gets done, like, are you just going to start getting building permits in? Hey, how you doing? Good, how are you? Yeah, pretty good.
yeah, we have a 90-day gap. Yeah, they clear all of them. As soon as that's done, we'll go through the process.
It helps you with this. Can you not even submit?
We've given Philip as a master plan, and he's submitted his questions.
Okay.
So we'll get those things resolved.
Yeah.
And then
You're on track. Okay, good.
Well, it sounds like that's a good thing too.
well, we're trying to beat some weather, but I don't think we're going to do it. No, I don't think that's going to work. But anyhow.
That's good. Like I said, anything else you can know,
Yep.
even if I can't help, like,
I went up to
I understand.
Valley, just something.
Thanks.
Like a condominium, but I could pay high secretary, so it's like 10 days. And I was looking at Highway 80 East, and I'm like, I can just get on Highway 80 East and just keep going back. I got ways, but I think I gotta go back home. Good, yeah.
I'll just tell her, she always calls me, so don't bother to say.
I could probably do it this week, but what it says is something about the adjacent structure.
Oh, that's right, you told me.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to, I just haven't been able to put it out there.
Yeah, just let me know. I'll tell her it's coming.
Yeah, there you go, that's a good answer.
Yeah, hello, man. Yeah,
Okay, but hey, thank you for the reminder.
not a problem. She's waiting for her carpenter guy to put the smoky filter carbon monoxide. And I told her 2 plugs in there. She changes GFI to do that. Trying to get.
Did Bill get out there?
Huh?
Did Bill go in there?
No, because her friend hasn't gone over to fix it. I said, don't have him come. And he did her wrong. I mean, why do we want to do that? We want him to walk in, everything's great, go home. You know? And we're done. We don't have to have you back. That's all I'm trying to do. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been to that rodeo. Yeah. Hey, Jesse, how are you? I'm good.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening. Let me call to order the regular City Council meeting for the City of St. Helena for September 11th, 2018. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Goberstein, would you lead us, please?
Sure. Especially on September 11th, I think we should honor the country. So, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as Ms. Goberstein said, this is September 11th. I think all of us have vivid memories of September 11th, 2001. And so let's have a moment of silence in memory of those who lost their lives, those who are badly injured, and all first responders, including many who continue to suffer today from the toxic effects of what happened. All right. Roll call, please.
Mayor Galbraith?
Here.
Vice Mayor White?
Here.
Councilmember Doring?
Here.
Ellsworth?
Here.
Coberstein?
Here.
Next item on our agenda is public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address us with respect to matters not on our agenda, and public forum comment is limited to 4 minutes. Mr. Farmer.
Good evening. I would like to bring up an item as a representative of the St. Helena Community Band. I'm Jeff Farmer. I reside 1533 Tainter in town. We know that the city is embarking on a new city hall and a reconfiguration of Lyman Park. The St. Helena Community Band believes that changes to the park gazebo should be an essential element of that plan. We would love to perform in the gazebo rather than on the lawn, but the current gazebo makes this impossible because, number one, it's too small, number two, it's separated totally from the audience, and it's just not too feasible to use. In speaking with the chamber, they have the same issues with their bands that they hire for the Concerts in the Park series. They also all play on the lawn. We are communicating with both the Chamber and the St. Helena Historical Society about the gazebo, and one of the things we've learned is the interesting history of that gazebo. We all agree at this point that the gazebo right now is not too functional and some changes need to be made. Can the current gazebo be changed in keeping with its history to be useful today? Maybe. Or is a completely new gazebo appropriate? Maybe. And if so, what would happen to the current gazebo? We're very sensitive to its history. The original gazebo, the one that's there, is a result of the efforts of the Women's Improvement Club and the St. Helena Concert Band of the late, about 100 years ago. And in the early 1920s, the gazebo was built after the urging of the St. Helena Concert Band, our predecessor, over 90 years ago. So we find it fitting that today we help make the gazebo functional today as our predecessor did in the 1920s. We stand ready to help. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Interesting comment. Any further public comment? All right, let me close public forum and return to reports by staff, City Council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. We met in closed session. Did we have any reportable action?
The City Council did meet this afternoon in closed session to discuss that item designated on the afternoon closed session agenda. No reportable action was taken.
Mr. Prestwich?
Just a brief update. Last year, after the fires in 2017, the community held essentially an impromptu thanks and gratitude potluck in Lyman Park as a way of showing appreciation for the heroic fire efforts within the region, and to resurrect and really continue that community gathering. We have identified a date that we think would be well suited for the community. It coincides with the Harvest Festival to redo and continue this community potluck concept, and that would be Thursday, October 18th. We're planning more details. We'll have a flyer down the road, but we wanted to begin to put that on the community's radar and on everyone's calendar.
And the Harvest Festival is the 25th? 20th. All right. Ms. Mitz? Mr. Fopoulos? Mr. Housh? Mr. Hernandez?
Down here. So on the August 29th, Public Works kicked off the Integrated Utility Master Plan. So we're getting that thing kicked off. Also, I wanted to plug the coastal cleanup. It's this weekend, this Saturday, between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m. at Jacob Miley Park. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Goberstein?
Nothing.
Mr. Ellsworth?
I've got a few things. I want to remind folks about the Napa County Strategic Plan Survey that's out now. If it didn't come to you in an email, you can go online to the Napa County website or punch in Napa County Strategic Plan Survey. Having folks from the Up Valley zip codes complete the survey will help make sure that our Up Valley voices are heard here. So anybody who gets a chance to go online and fill that out, that would be great. Also, the city is working on a web page that will be up soon for Measure E, which is the city affordable housing measure that's going to be on the ballot. And will there also be information on the county initiative?
We can provide a link to the county's measure as well.
Okay, so that will be coming out soon. And then the third thing is that I just want to mention this. I'm glad we have our great fire crew here. The other day, I was driving, I'm going to say this because it's so dry out there. I'm just trying to remind people of how vulnerable we are with any kind of flame. I was driving down the road, and I saw smoke and pulled over, and there was a fire burning in a ditch. And luckily, a few other people pulled over, and we were able to get the fire out. Somebody had called 911, and the fire department showed up very quickly and took control of the situation. But one little spark can get things going. We were just lucky that people saw it in time. So I'm just putting it out there that it's very dry, and so be very, very careful, please. Thank you.
Good advice. Mr. Doring?
My remarks are about a future agenda item. The last couple of weeks we've been talking about the potential for exercising council oversight on water customers' compliance with our water agreements and also with conditions of approval. For example, a condition that requires water neutrality. So I would like to agendize that item for at least a discussion as to whether we can create some legislation that would allow us to exercise that oversight while also maintaining the confidentiality of the records to the public. So this would be something that would be either subject to discussion and approval, something either a subcommittee or council can look at to exercise its oversight, but not distributing that confidential information to the public. So I would at least like to have a discussion on whether that is a policy that we would like to undertake.
I would join that. So we'll try and put it on a future agenda in the not too distant future.
That would have my full support as well.
I have nothing.
All right, and very good. I have just one matter not previously discussed, and that is that the St. Helena Historical Society, Bonnie Thurine, asked me to remind folks that the Historical Society on September 25th at the Upper Valley campus at 5:30 will have a very interesting presentation by UC Berkeley archaeologist John Holson. He's from the Pacific Legacy Group, and it will deal with what they learned as they oversaw the flood project dig. And apparently they've got a lot that they learned and a lot of artifacts, and so I would certainly encourage folks, if they have the time, to go there September 25th, Upper Valley campus, And there's also a promise of a wine and food reception that should induce high attendance. So keep that in mind. 5:30. Don't think I missed anybody at this point. That goes to presentations and public recognitions. And we have oaths of office. We have 2 firefighters, Mr. Sorensen, Chief.
So we have here our 2 of our first career firefighters after 107 years of the St. Helena Fire Department. We transitioned from a 100% part-time department to a combination department this last July with Nick Solakian and Martin Macias, who work at the station responding to calls Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. So we have Nick Solakian goes first, and the pinner, Molly Beglin. And you're going to take the oath, and then you're going to pin him. But first, we're going to embellish a little bit here. Nick has, he joined the St. Helena Fire Department right after graduation in June. He has 10 years in the department. He rose to the rank of captain. Before employed with the St. Helena City, Nick was employed by Brown's Auto Parts, answering most calls and most runs on an engine in 2017. Also in 2017, Nick responded, we all remember what happened on October 8th. Nick responded to the wine train versus bus that happened around noontime. Then he responded to a junkyard fire in American Canyon that torched 20 acres of classic cars. Then he was assigned to the Tubbs fire right around when that happened, about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And ran on the Tubbs fire for a total of 65 hours straight with no sleep. Most recently, Nick responded as engine boss on engine 217 to the Carr and Snell fires for a total of 18 days this year so far. So he's an excellent choice as our career captain, and we're ready for the oath.
Okay, if I can have you come stand up this center.
Okay.
You're going to raise your right hand. You're going to repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Nick Solakian,
Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear.
Well, I will support and defend
While support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will
that I will
bear true faith
bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental obligation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of invasion,
and that I will,
and that I will,
well and faithfully,
well and faithfully,
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I'm about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin Macias is another St. Helena grad, 12 years on the department, rose to the rank of engineer. Before employment of St. Helena City, Martin was a paramedic with AMR stationed up valley here in town. Martin is bilingual in Spanish, reads and writes it. In 2017, Martin responded as the engineer in Brush 17 with Johnny White and J.P. Havens to the Tubbs fire. As the second unit responding, their first assignment to rescue a person trapped in a burning home, and went on for 55 hours straight without sleep. Recently, Martin responded to the Carr and Ranch fires and did a fantastic job as engine boss and engineer. So we have Juanita Macias, his wife, to do the badge pinning. Sorry.
You can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Martin Macias,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the State of California
the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith
bear true faith
and allegiance
and allegiance
to the Constitution of the State of California
to the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the United States,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will
and that I will
well and faithfully
well and faithfully
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
All right.
Okay, good.
It's daughter Sochi with the blue tutu. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch the next two items on the agenda and read the Proclamation Suicide Prevention Month 2018 next. So, is there anybody to receive the proclamation? Please come up. Okay, I'm going to read the proclamation, but as I read it, I'm going to omit the citations, just take it from me that everything is well cited. The difficulty with reading the citations is it breaks up the reading of the proclamation. So, City of St. Helena Proclamation Suicide Prevention Month 2018. Whereas the Napa County Suicide Prevention Council, a public-private collaborative of Napa families impacted by suicide and agencies that serve the Napa County community, strives to save lives and envisions a suicide-free community through education and training, stigma reduction, and provision of resources to combat suicide, and whereas suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States and the second leading cause of death among individuals 25-34, and the third leading cause of death among individuals 15-24, and whereas in 2016 California accounted for 9.5%, which equates to 4,288 of the United States' 44,695 suicides, resulting in one person in California dying by suicide every 2 hours, and whereas more than twice as many people die by suicide in California annually than by homicide, and whereas suicide cost California a total of $4,246,494,000 of combined lifetime medical and work loss in 2010, or an average of $1,085,000 per suicide death, and whereas Napa County has, between 2000 and 2017, averaged more than 14 suicide deaths annually, the greatest number being individuals 45 to 54 of age, and whereas the rate of deaths by suicide in Napa County from 2008 to 2016 was greater than the California suicide rate, and whereas every Napa County resident can be an ally by learning about the warning signs of suicidal behavior and how to support someone at risk of suicide, Whereas every Napa County resident can eliminate stigma associated with suicide mental illness by treating individuals with mental illness with respect and compassion. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, do hereby proclaim September 2018 as Suicide Prevention Month in St. Helena and urge the citizens of St. Helena to learn more about suicide detection and prevention. Dated September 11th, 2018. If you would like to say a few words.
I would. Thank you.
By all means.
Thank you, Mayor.
And there's your...
Oh, the suitable for framing thing. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Harry Collymore. I work with the County Mental Health Administration. The proclamation sums up a lot of the key points. We are averaging 14 suicides a year here in the county, and each one is devastating. One of the things that the newly created Suicide Prevention Council is focusing on is a goal of zero. There are actually steps to be taken in terms of community education, community intervention. We're doing a lot partnering with the schools and providing resources with the students and the teachers and the administration to try to identify at-risk youth in particular as early as possible and provide them with support services. And this is being done in collaboration with most of the local nonprofits who provide mental health services, as well as the county and the cities. So I very much appreciate the City of St. Helena declaring September Suicide Awareness Month, and I urge you all to do what you can to learn more about it and to help us eliminate this as a community concern. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, this proclamation reminds me and spurs me to make just the following comment, that this city desperately needs a youth and families master plan, and it's going to be something I'll be working to pass in my next term, hopefully with your blessing and the blessing of this council. More to follow.
All right, very good. All right, next item, 6.3, Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee report by Mr. Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. I want to thank Council for letting me have the opportunity to present the work that we're doing. As you all know, our main mission is to provide viable options and creative solutions to transportation and sustainability issues to you, the City Council. To that end, we are developing a set of climate action principles, and we're developing these principles from already existing climate action plans that the City of Calistoga has and the County of Napa is just about to finish. And we're taking as what we believe is relevant to St. Helena and developing our own set of unique principles. After a lot of thought, we decided to divide the project into three particular areas. One is transportation, because transportation's in our mission. And as far as sustainability, we're looking at two major areas, energy and water. So this set of principles will be basically three parts: transportation, energy, and water. To date, the transportation part we've completed a first draft, and it's right now under review by Public Works, and we await their feedback. And we've started to do the first draft of the energy plan, set of principles, and we hope to have that completed, first draft, by the end of this month. And after that, we will start on the water set of principles. So our goal is to develop really just a set of principles, not a working plan, a set of principles, guidelines that can be then brought forth under your direction to create a formal plan, much like Calistoga has and the county is working on. So that's been our major focus over the last 4 or 5 months since I last spoke to you. But in addition to that, it's been brought to our attention by a couple of our members, Donna Hines and Tom Vance, that the city uses Roundup to control weeds, and it has some serious possible cancer implications. So we had some presentations and analysis by both Tom and Donna, and we're thankful they drove that through our committee. And I understand the city is working hard on that. We would also like to see the school district involved with that, because obviously their kids would be affected by this as well, or our kids would be affected by this as well. Excuse me. The other item I want to just mention is, like other committees and commissions, we have a vacancy, probably no surprise there, and we're actively looking for a new member. In the future, we want, just to give you an idea of what our 3 to 6 months outlook looks like, we want to, as I mentioned, develop the first draft completed, vetted by Public Works of the climate action, set of climate action principles. We're also learning a lot about electric vehicle technology and how we can utilize that application and also other applications of direct current generation, such as batteries, and how they could be applied to everyday life here in St. Helena. Another item we're looking at closely is the Vine Trail. Surprise, was in the news today. They apparently have a pretty good sense of how it's going to go through, at least by St. Helena up through Calistoga. So we're asking Philip Sales to provide an update on that to our committee so we can fold that into our transportation plan. Julie Spencer of the Rianda House is going to be speaking to us on sensitive issues regarding seniors and transportation. They have very specific issues that maybe we're missing in our plan, so we look forward to her. We're also looking at how we can use social media to promote what we do, and we want to do that in accordance to the Brown Act, of course, under whatever restrictions they require. So we're looking to do that as well over the next 3 months. That's really it. I want to really thank our current members, Glenn Smith, Pam Smithers, and Tom Vance. Without their energy and direction, we wouldn't be going anywhere. It's great to have them on the committee. And also I'd like to acknowledge Donna Hines and Chris Coriel for being on the committee when I first started and for their contributions. And I'd like to really thank Tobias Barr. See here, there is. He is he's our contact with the city, and he coordinates everything we do and keeps all the cats corralled. And then finally, I'd like to thank Jeff Ellsworth, our council representative on the committee, for his support. That's all I have. Any questions, comments?
Sounds like a pretty vigorous agenda to me.
Yeah, 6 months. Well, when I was last year, I thought we'd be done with the whole plan, so
yeah,
you know how it goes.
Yeah.
There was one other item that came up at the meeting the last week about trying to get all the cities and the counties standardizing their electric vehicle charging platforms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That I think is something that we could bring up and hopefully have an agendized discussion.
Yeah, we hope to have him back to our next ATSC meeting to finish his presentation, because there's a lot more he has to say.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Thank you for your service.
All right, next item is staff briefing, home grant update by Director Housh.
Thank you, Mayor Galbraith, members of the council. You will recall at the last meeting there was a question from Councilmember Doring regarding the status of the grant, and with the specific question regarding was there a timeline for the funds to be expended. And so I wanted to come back and give kind of a brief overview. And then Councilmember Koberstein asked me a great question, which I did not have the answer to, and I will try to provide some general information on the total amount that can be borrowed as well. So the city does have until June 30th of 2019 to expend all of the funds. So we have, looking at about 9 months left, and as of today, we've spent a little over half of those funds. We've to date received 14 applications for owner-occupied rehabilitation. And I guess I should step back for a minute and say the Home Grant Program is a grant opportunity for low-income homeowners to receive interest-free, payment-free loans for a 30-year time frame, and the balance is due at 30 years or if the home sells. And so, so this is available for folks who are in deed-restricted units. You'll recall we presented this to the City Council when the grant was applied for and then when it was received, but we haven't done much follow-up, so I do appreciate the prompt from Councilmember Doring. So, yeah, there's no balance due for 30 years unless you sell the home, and then that's when the balance is paid off. Obviously, you have to be, the home must be within the city limits, and there are some qualifying income restrictions, and that all information is available. We've created a couple flyers, one specific to manufactured homes and one more specific to stick-built homes, both of which have the annual income limitations that are on the back. But I wanted to get into a little bit more of the details. So as of today, 9 applications have been approved. We're currently reviewing 2 others. 2 of them were rejected as they did not meet the income limitations, and then 1 was withdrawn. Of these, 4 of them have been completed, 3 are in process and are anticipated to be completed by the end of October, and the other 2 should be completed by December. We've expanded on our marketing and outreach. We did an initial first push, met with some folks, the property owners at Vineyard Valley, and did direct mailers to the property owners of the deed-restricted units on Voorhees Circle. And that's how we got our initial push of applications. We're now following up and essentially redoing that marketing effort. We've met directly with the park manager to make sure that their residents are aware at Vineyard Valley. There were some representatives at the farmers market at the last Friday. We have done another direct mailer of these flyers to the folks who live on Voorhees. And there is some door-to-door personal contact planned for those. They are mailed out in English and in Spanish to make sure that folks who are maybe don't have English as their first language have an opportunity to see those. But yeah, it's a great program, and we do have funds. We received initially up to $500,000. Councilmember Koberstein asked me briefly, is there a maximum loan amount? And I did not have the answer to that question. I know you can get upwards of about $28,000 because I've personally approved a loan that was that amount, but I don't know if there's a cap, and I will get that information and we'll be sure to include it in the information we're providing. But it's a great program, and we hope to be able to expend all the money before the program ends. So if you qualify, please contact City Hall, and we can get you some information on how to apply and take advantage of the program.
And it is not only for deed-restricted properties, correct?
I think it's income-based, that's correct. So it's folks who are in a deed-restricted unit and also who just qualify under their income. That is correct.
Okay,
and thank you for clarifying.
And what agency is it that would impose a cap if there is a cap?
It would be through the loan requirements, which I believe it's a federal funding that is passed down through the state. So it would be one of those 2 organizations that have the maximum loan amounts.
Okay. All right, any further follow-up?
Maybe for people who are watching us on TV and don't have this, you could tell them like what the income limits are for a 1-person or 2-person household.
Sure, that's a good suggestion. So the maximum annual income for a 1-person household is $51,450. A 2-person household is $58,800, and it goes up from there. With a maximum for an 8-person household of $97,350. And so if you think you're close to that, please reach out to City Hall and we will get you the information.
Was this, I read my last issue of The Shine kind of quickly. Have we published this in our newsletter?
You know, I have to follow up with that. I'm not sure. I don't believe it was in the most recent version. But that is a good suggestion for another push on the marketing.
That goes to every utility bill payer, right?
Yeah, good.
Great.
And then what is the time period again?
So the funds have to be expended by June 30th of 2019.
Okay.
All right, any further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the follow-up.
Next item up is the consent calendar, and we have on consent 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6. Again, if any council member or any member of the public wishes an item on consent to be removed from consent, please let me know, and I'll do it. Yes, Ms. Burnett? 8.4, all right. At this point, the chair would entertain a motion to approve consent items 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.5, and 8.6.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Doring? Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Who made the second? Councilmember
Got a
Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. So that takes us back to 8.4. This deals with the Kosmont companies, and let me ask, I think, the city manager to address that briefly, and then Ms. Manette, you can tell us what your question is.
So this is a contract with the Kosmont companies to continue work with the downtown retail strategy as well as the city's asset strategy implementation. When I say asset strategy, I'm really referring to continuation of the discussion with the SHAPE committee and work related to the city hall parcel, the library parcel, and other city assets that we own.
All right. Ms. Manette, why don't you approach the podium and tell us what it is about this that excites your imagination.
My gripe. I'm Bobby Monette, and I'm speaking as a citizen. And I have a few things and a few questions, a few things to say and a few questions. First of all, I want to express my happiness that the city is not in dire financial straits. More money is always great. I understand that, especially with all the public work improvement projects we've chosen to accomplish and expected economic downturns in the future. However, I ask that we stop defining our fiscal baseline as part of a competition with other municipalities for TOT or any measure of money. I ask the council that we base our revenue goals on what we need and not greed. This report recommends allowing wine train disembarkments, encouraging increasing millennial participation in the city either as residents and or visitors, encourages a proliferation of amplified music and other forms of urban-style vibrancy. I encourage the City Council to consider the following with respect to these recommendations. How will an increase in temporary and or permanent population impact our infrastructure, potable water, wastewater system, light pollution, noise pollution, and density? How will increased density and activity impact our fire department and police force? What are the costs to the city in terms of money, and most importantly, in terms of our sense of safety? Residents who choose to live in small rural towns give up urban amenities, including an extensive menu of cultural activities, high-tech entertainment, urban-style vibrancy, and diversity. We give these things up in exchange for lower density, safety, peace, and tranquility. I'm asking you to consider these small-town lifestyle benefits when tasking Kosmont and or the city staff to implement whichever recommendations you embrace from the report. And I have one final question. Will you consider agendizing for discussion and exploration the issue of maximum sustainable population for our town? I know that cities cannot cap their population size. However, if we research this issue responsibly and in order to have the best possible information about what that figure might be in terms of our infrastructure and small town lifestyle, that would inform our future growth management decisions to our benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? So let me see if I understand this correctly. This is providing authorization for you to... Oh, yes. Yes, please.
This is just public comment regarding this thing, right?
Yes. I'm sorry. I didn't appreciate that
I arrived late,
you
and
wish
I
to
apologize,
speak.
and so I will be reading from my phone. So, Tracy Sweeney, 1407 Kearney Street. I'm here speaking as both a resident and an employee and general manager at Behringer Vineyards down the street. And we are a long-time business. We've actually been welcoming guests to the Napa Valley since immediately post-Prohibition. So this has been a vibrant city, and folks who have moved here since the 20s have welcomed that. What I'm here tonight, excuse me if I read, because I literally just got out of my car. So I'm here tonight to demonstrate the importance of a business-friendly environment to St. Helena's long-term economic viability. and to ask the City Council adopts the recommendations authorizing the City Manager to execute a professional services agreement with the Kosmont Company and assist with the implementation of a downtown economic strategies. It is encouraging to see activities and initiatives that have long been discussed finally be committed to in a working blueprint for action. We ask, in particular, that the Council undertake efforts to demonstrate a willingness to do the following: remove barriers to business development through simplified and increased by-right uses on Main Street, work with businesses to accelerate permit process and to create an environment of collaboration, to launch the downtown facade and improvement programs and extend all along Main Street, including up to our end of the town, as well as to our entry port on the south, to work with the wine train to pilot programs that bring visitors into St. Helena, to acknowledge the importance of transient occupancy tax to our city's financial outlook over time, and to support our existing hotel properties as well as consider additional boutique hotel entrance to the marketplace. Enhance the Chamber of Commerce programming and support destination marketing. Recognize the importance of tourism to our city and eliminate language in both our general plan and our ordinances that discourage visitor offerings. Recognize the contribution our local wine business makes to our community. We bring vital jobs, sales tax, and support of local nonprofits across the board. Please work with and not against us as part of the historical fabric of our town. These topics have come up from time to time over the years for action, and yet we are still in just the discussion phase. Votes from members on this current council have been in conflict with supportive business climate. We hope the time has come with each of you that your votes will support the long-term economic sustainability of St. Helena, embrace the recommendations of the Kosmont study, and demonstrate you stand with and not against our business community. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? All right, let me close public comment. My understanding, Mr. Prestwich, is if we approve this, that what the Kosmont companies would be doing with the direction of the council. Is that roughly right?
Yes, and the report that was published yesterday that will be discussed on Monday the 17th includes some references to some additional work that we're anticipating would be done with this particular contract. This relates to additional analysis of the City Hall parcel as well as other city assets that we own.
Right. All right.
And then later in the meeting, we're going to discuss the actual report. This is just pushing this contract through.
That's correct, and it's also important to note that we're anticipating these studies are not necessarily simplistic studies. This contract is flexible and anticipates this is really a starting point for a number of different analyses that will lead to subsequent decisions, including possible City Hall replacement.
All right. Any further discussion?
Just as a point of interest, I'm fascinated by the two speakers who have sort of set out opposing points of view on this issue, and very well said on both sides. I might add, just as a point of interest for me, is that wouldn't it be great if the two of you could get together and come up with a third way? But I know you're shaking your head. Absolutely not. You know, there's got to be some common ground here. You know, the whole idea is the central question that this city is facing and will continue to face is the balance of economic sustainability, vitality, and maintaining our quality of life. And so we're all here trying to do the best we can. You've made your views very well stated. It's a very hard issue for us no matter where we go. I'm supportive of this contract for sure, but I just thought I'd put that out there where we continue to try to find common ground, and I know that this council will try to work through that because at some point we're going to face, what Healdsburg and others are facing, and it's going to become even more contentious unless we sort of try to work together to come up with solutions that work for our community. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Any further public comment?
I'll save mine for later.
All right. At this point, I would entertain a motion to approve item 8.4.
Move to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes. Sorry.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Okay. That takes us to public hearing 9.1. And is that you?
I'll speak to
Mr.
that.
Hernandez?
Thank you.
Okay.
This is a continuation, a follow-up from last meeting, the annexation of 1025 and 1045 Pratt Avenue. Property is currently on septic, and staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the annexation of the territory to the St. Helena Municipal Sewer District Number 1. And I'll be happy to answer any questions further to that.
This was an issue that was thoroughly discussed previously at
That's
council
correct.
level. All right. Is there any public comment at this point? Let me close public comment. Any further?
That's correct. This item requires a 4/5 vote.
Is there any further council discussion? I would entertain a motion to approve item 9.1.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Poplis?
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ellsworth,
Yes.
Oberstein,
Yes.
Doring,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. Next item is 10.1, citywide classification and compensation study date. And Ms. Robinson, is that you? Wonderful.
Mayor, City Council members, thank you for having us tonight. In June of 2018, a contract was awarded to Ralph Anderson and Associates to do a citywide classification and compensation study, and their team has been working with our employees and HR staff in completing the classification portion, and we thought it would be appropriate to bring Doug Johnson and give you an update on where we're at today. So,
all right, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'll try and make this quick. Just wanted to give you an update on the study. I think I'm going to control the slides here. So perfect. So there's two parts to the study. The classification study is essentially looking at job titles and job descriptions of employees. That's a pretty transparent process. We're actually on site doing interviews today and tomorrow. And then we'll start developing our recommendations. A little bit further down the road, we'll be dealing with the compensation portion of the study, and that involves doing a market survey and then developing that data into a set of recommendations and an implementation strategy for the city. I wanted to talk a little bit about doing market surveys. Sometimes when I work with organizations, there's this concern that market surveys are somehow going to obligate you to do something. And I have to remind people that it's just data. So the reason we do a survey is that we don't want to use dice, we don't want to use a dartboard, we don't want a wrestling match over what compensation ought to be. The idea is that you as a business, as an organization, need to be able to recruit and retain your employees. And so data informs you as to what the market conditions are, so then you can make some appropriate strategic decisions related to compensation. I will note that if you ever get to impasse, if you ever get to a point in bargaining, and there's a lot more of that happening in California right now, data is what's used in those processes. So fact-finding or anything, mediation types of processes require data. And so data is very good. That's why we start the process with collecting data. So the idea is to make sure that we're reflecting the market you're competing in. What that means is it makes no sense to look at the Southern California marketplace when we start doing market surveys, because that's a move. So generally we're looking at commuting distances, commuting corridors, and those sorts of things in terms of being able to analyze and look at what types of competing organizations have similar jobs. This is not something tonight that's an important thing, but I wanted to kind of plant a seed, this idea of market position. When we do a survey, one of the later decisions that you'll have to come to a decision on, either yourselves or through direction to the city manager, is do you want to be at the middle of the market? That's where most organizations kind of shoot for. Do you want to be at the top of the market or the bottom of the market? So you kind of strategically make a decision in terms of where you want to be in the marketplace based on affordability, what you need to pay in order to be able to successfully recruit and retain employees. So one of the things that we're gearing up for right now is actually selecting agencies to survey. The nice thing about doing public sector, municipal types of projects like this is we don't have to buy data. If I was working for a private sector or a nonprofit organization, I would be contacting organizations that do this kind of survey research, and I'd be buying data. And the downside of that is that it's old. It doesn't really necessarily translate and match up well to this organization. By doing a custom survey and contacting organizations that we know are going to be somewhat similar or ones that you're competing with, it gives us the ability to generate very, very good data that's related to, again, this idea of who you're competing against and who you potentially have to recruit against in terms of other organizations. So the criteria we look at: historical practices, proximity where they're located, nature of services. Cities obviously provide a good base of information because of job similarity, employer size, and economic similarity. So I wanted to hit four of these just really quick. So nature of services, bottom line is you look at organizations that have similar jobs. Because you have a fire department and a police department, those are elements that are important in terms of selecting agencies. You also have a library and you have water, wastewater services. So we want to make sure that we're looking at agencies that are going to give us those types of jobs. What that means is that cities are going to be the best starting point in terms of finding comparable organizations. There's a potential of looking at special districts. Generally, we're not looking at school districts or educational organizations. They're not going to have planning and engineering and the types of jobs that you have in an organization like this. And we're ideally going to look for around a dozen employers as we do the survey. In terms of proximity, we can look at a reasonable commuting distance. We don't need to get into a debate about that, but as a starting point, we typically look at 60 miles. So we'll look at 60 driving miles from the city's location and also look at kind of surrounding counties and commuting corridors. Employer size, the balance that we have here is that organizations that are more similar in size in terms of population, budget, number of employees, are going to have a more similar structure and have better job matches. Having said that, if there is an adjacent organization that's just 4 or 5 or 10 miles down the road that's much larger, it may be important to look at them as well because they have an impact on your marketplace. So we want to make sure that that's not, we're not going to look at all larger organizations. We're going to make sure we have at least a sufficient number in terms of similar size, but may look at some larger ones as well. The last thing is economic similarity. Obviously, when you look at this particular region and you drive down into the Bay Area or you go up north or go east or west, there's going to be differences in terms of living costs. Housing is a big component of that, goods and services, utilities, taxes, fuel. We rely on an outside index, a third-party index by a company called the Economic Research Institute, and it allows us to be able to look specifically at cost of living as part of our analysis of looking at other agencies and making sure we're getting good potential matchups in terms of similarity of cities. So the criteria that we're kind of starting with is to focus more on cities, make sure they have police and fire. If we can find organizations that have library, water, wastewater, that would be a bonus, although we can potentially use some supplemental agencies to get at that data. We're looking at around a 60-mile commuting distance. Commuting corridors is kind of the focus, and then again, focusing on balance in terms of size and economics. There's not going to be a perfect set of agencies. We're looking at a balance, and generally what happens if we're going for around 12 agencies, there's usually a solid 5 or 6 that everybody agrees on, and then there's usually 2 or 3 that people will kind of go back and forth on, and police may have one particular interest in terms of agencies, and the SEIU employee group may have a different perspective on that. Managers may have a different perspective. You may have a different perspective. So we're trying to develop recommendations based more on objective criteria, and this is the criteria that we're starting with. Just as a sample, these are kind of some preliminary agencies we're looking at. I realize that this is kind of small for you to see, but it gives you an idea. What we're trying to do is layer in specific information that we can look at that doesn't talk about compensation, but describes the organization. So we have the population served, because that gives us an indication of size. Again, we'll note, as I had in a previous slide, daytime populations can obviously vary. So if you're a tourist destination, your daytime or the municipal services that you provide, particularly in police and fire, are going to be higher relative to the census population. We've got driving distance. Then we have revenues and expenditures, and this is from the State Department of Finance, or actually California Controller. So these are 2016 figures. That's the latest that they have on their in their resources. And then we have a couple columns that utilize that Economic Research Institute, ERI. It gives us the ability to look at cost of living. Most of these agencies, anybody in here that's lower than 100 is a lower cost of living. So you can look at an agency like Benicia, they're 74.9%. That means they're that much lower in cost of living compared to this community. If you look at Mill Valley, they're 110.5. That means they're 10.5% higher in terms of cost of living. And then we have the wage index. Wage index looks at relative wages. Again, not city to city in terms of municipal employers, but looking at the economic base, the private employers that are within these communities. And you can see that variances in wages are much less, there's much less variance in terms of those differences. Arguably in a place like Benicia, much lower cost of living, but their wages are actually 1.8% higher relative to what you would find in this community. Again, just looking at the broad employment base. So those are factors that we can look at. We don't want to overly weight those. We're just using that as a way to inform us in terms of potential differences in these agencies. This is a reflection of the region that you're in. You're going to be an agency that has a higher cost of living relative to many of the agencies you're going to compare with. And then we can look at the county location, and then I have check marks in terms of police, fire, library, water, wastewater. So if this was a group we were going to use, it would satisfy my objective, which is to have a solid 8 or 9 matches from each of these organizations for all the jobs that we're surveying in the city. And it gives us not a size of a survey that is going to be unrealistic or overly burdensome in terms of being able to collect and maintain and utilize that data. And with that, I'm shortened to the point. I'll answer any questions you have. There's no decision, by the way, that needs to be made tonight. I'm just simply giving you an update in terms of where we are, and this is kind of the next big step in terms of selecting and kind of fleshing out these agencies so that we can start the survey.
I have a question.
Sure, please.
Actually, I have two. Pretty simple. I'm a little surprised at the 60-mile distance that you're looking at. There was recently a study that was done for the county in conjunction with hotel development and employees, and it had a commute shed map in it about to indicate about how far people would go to get up valley here, and my recollection is it didn't go nearly that far. It was I don't remember Benicia and places like that being within the commute shed. And given that traffic is not improving, I'm just wondering if we shrink it down, do we have no data, and then it's not worthwhile?
Yeah, if we shrink it down, we potentially lose agencies that are a similar size. There's a few agencies that are going to be in Marin County that are very similar in terms of a size and operational characteristics. And if we go to something like 45 miles, I think those drop out. So it's really just a balance of, if we restrict to 45, we're going to have to include larger agencies potentially, and that may not give us as good a job matches.
Okay. And when it comes to compensation, is it the whole package that you're looking at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Salary and benefits, retirement, health insurance, other benefits as well. Yes.
Good. Thank you.
And what is the time frame on the next step that you're?
So we're gearing up to have data collected before the end of the year. So we're going to start the survey in a matter of weeks, and then be able to work through a process of being able to have that data to report at a later date.
Excuse me. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would just add that Calistoga just recently updated its compensation package using us as one of their comparison cities. This was just a week and a half ago, and they concluded that they were very competitive. So I thought that was very interesting. I would just streamline it and go right to their package.
Same size. Any further? Is there any public comment? All right, let me close the public comment. That was a very clear presentation, and it seems to me that the basket of cities that you've chosen are reasonable, and I look forward to the report.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Next item is 10.2. This is the review and prioritization of draft City of St. Helena Downtown Economic Strategy. This is the handiwork of our city manager. It's a report that
Thank you,
reads
Mayor.
exceptionally well. Let me turn it over to you.
I think we're in the process of getting the screen up and also retrieving the clicker.
You know, one problem with my position here is that I can't see really the screens. The one's right behind me, and then the other one is at such an angle it's very difficult. But oh, it's on the iPad. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well,
It's just one liability of being a mayor.
I know.
We'd have to refresh your screen.
It's not on the iPad.
You'd have to download the agenda since it was updated.
I'm going
I
to.
can turn. Okay. You watch it on there. I'll see the big screen.
Okay.
So just for logistics, I have copies of the specific staff report in paper on the back desk if anyone would like a copy. And then the city clerk has included this PowerPoint on the agenda, so there's an active link if you wanted to look online. So just as a little preparation and background on this item, in late 2017, the City Council held a strategic planning workshop to discuss 3-year goals and 12-month strategic objectives, ensuring the long-term economic sustainability of the city while safeguarding St. Helena's unique culture and quality of life emerged as a key goal, along with a specific desire to revitalize the downtown to improve its resilience. So a few months ago, the city set in motion a retail analysis of the downtown, and on July 24th, you received a presentation from the Kosmont companies, a downtown retail market analysis, this document that included a number of recommendations and some observations based on interviews, research that they did, and so forth. And so the draft downtown economic strategy that we'll be discussing tonight is really built on that. The direction to the city manager was to consider those objectives and bring to the council a plan. So tonight's goals are to review, discuss, and refine this draft downtown economic strategy, and also to prioritize the draft strategies, meaning we want to categorize these initiatives as either immediate, near-term, or a little longer term. And the plan is to receive feedback tonight and bring you a final document in 2 weeks. So let's jump right in. This is an overview of the strategy at a glance, and we've really classified this into 3 different categories. The first being place, think infrastructure when we say place, but the goal here is to invest in public infrastructure improvements to enhance the pedestrian experience. We have a number of ideas related to that. Process, create a responsive and predictable development review process for business investment. And finally, people, cultivate and reinforce historic downtown's reputation as a distinctive destination. So what we want to do is walk through each of these, and feel free to pause and ask me questions along the way. And when we're finished with the presentation, you may have additional questions you have. I think you'll want to take some public comment at that point, and then we can begin trying to work on identifying whether you see these as near-term, immediate, longer-term initiatives. So in terms of place and infrastructure, what really drives the entire set of recommendations here relates to the $1.2 million sidewalk grant that the city has already received. So the great news is we have resources that the state has provided to us that we've prepared a request for a proposal. That request for a proposal will go out in the next couple of weeks, and from that work we'll spin off a number of other opportunities. But this is a sidewalk and streetscape improvement grant that will allow the city to replace sidewalks from the bridge just immediately north of Gotts all the way up to Pine Street at City Hall, both sides of the street. A very comprehensive project, and we'll talk about a few spin-off opportunities in just a minute. One of those is to pursue pedestrian alley beautification. So we have a number of pedestrian corridors. Think about Telegraph Alley, for example, that takes you from Main Street to the city's parking lot. We'll be building a bathroom there in the next couple of months. And that corridor has a surface treatment today that is broken concrete, probably laid at different times over the years. Certainly a canvas that could be enhanced. Are there opportunities to add a bench, a colorful bench? Are there opportunities to integrate art? The idea here is we have a number of pedestrian alleys that could be more attractive to our pedestrians, whether we're talking about locals within the city or visitors. Another strategy includes launching a downtown facade and tenant improvement program. What the report speaks to, and this is something that, frankly, I was anticipating we might want to encourage, and that the manager would recommend a program like this a couple of years from now. And I should mention that streetscape improvement, we anticipate going to construction in March or April of 2021. The month is important because we need to avoid the rain, but we also want to get in and out before the busy season for shoppers. But I was initially thinking it would be nice to have a program to encourage if a business needed a new awning or a business had an interest in updating their facade, that we launch a program with a sidewalk project, the actual construction phase, as sort of a pardon our dust program. But listening to the business community and some of the struggles related to the number of vacancies and growing number of vacancies downtown, it's certainly a program that I think has an opportunity to make an impact now. And by launching a program this year with resources this year, and we do have resources that are available to facilitate this, we could continue this program for several consecutive years through that actual sidewalk project, and probably be able to help a number of businesses over the next several years. Some cities take it a step further, and the concept here is to bring you back a draft policy and program that would include, at a minimum, the downtown facade opportunities for the exterior of the buildings. Other cities include opportunities up to a cap, and both the exterior and the interior improvements, we would need to establish a cap on what a dollar for dollar match might be. So, is it 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 a building? We'll have to make those policy choices. But the idea would be there may be some businesses that have been holding back on a possible improvement interior on their interior space that would benefit the business and then energize the space. And to take it as another step further, some communities have provided additional assistance in the form of an architect that may assist a prospective business looking at a vacant space to help them offset costs of starting their business. And so this would be an initiative that I would recommend you limit to only those spaces that have been vacant for at least 60 or 90 days. We've listed 90 days as a benchmark in the staff report, but the idea here is if you're interested in a concept of extending some funding to help offset tenant improvements to help immediately bring tenants into some of these vacant spaces, this is a program that other cities have launched.
Can I ask a question, or should I wait?
That was great.
Okay. On the sidewalk and streetscape, is there a potential for moving forward sooner on some of the streetscape aspects? I know we have to wait to get the whole sidewalk thing properly coordinated, but are there maybe ways to accelerate looking at some of the pedestrian alley improvements, that sort of thing, sooner?
I think the best answer to that question is my recommendation is it goes all at once. The good news is we have an RFP that's ready to go and hit the street, which means that 3 weeks later we'll be interviewing prospective consultants, and I think we'll have a good number of talented architects, landscape designers, planners that can help us with streetscape concepts. It is my understanding, though, that the city has maybe previously done some work on conceptual tenant improvements for at least Telegraph Alley. And there may be an opportunity if those can be integrated into this project, that those can move a little quicker. But I think what you'll want to see is consistent treatment throughout the city, one comprehensive plan, and this particular grant anticipates at least 3 community engagement meetings. And having been through some of these types of discussions in the past, the plan does evolve over time. So what I imagine we will see is a consultant will come in, give us a number of ideas in a workshop. We'll get some feedback. They'll come back with a concept. We'll tinker with that concept, and it will be refined over time to something that the community and the council feels is the right fit for this city.
Let me follow up just briefly. By when does the grant have to be expended, and is there any possibility of moving the program up so it's before 2021, which is 3 years away?
It's possible that we could potentially move it up, and it will depend on how quickly we move through the planning. The planning is going to be important, but at the same time, I think there is a possibility that we could hit an earlier construction season, whether it's fall. I do think that spring is the best time of year for the city, which means that we would really need to move on some of these items and isolate Main Street and essentially consider phasing some of the other related ideas.
When we discussed this previously, we talked about whether a portion of the work could be done ahead of the major project. And I think it's something we need to talk with the local business people about. We talked about, for instance, the laterals that might need to be replaced. Are we going to wait and do all that work at the same time, or is it better or worse for the businesses if we were to start that phase first using our own funding or program? Which is something I'd like to hear from the businesses about, because it might be a good way to make the whole thing go smoother and faster when the actual sidewalks come in. And second, there were some comments the other day at the Cameo about this program that I think as part of it, we have to have a really strong communication with the businesses about what's going on. Some people, for instance, mentioned that if they know when the area right in front of their store is going to be disturbed, they might close for business then and do things inside the store, that they might not otherwise do, clean, paint, whatever. So I think it's real important for us to do it as quickly as we can, given getting the proper design down. But if we can somehow step in and start some of the work early, I think it would be helpful.
And I would agree. And I think that one of the considerations that we'll have to make is, do the laterals, is it needed? Is it needed that we want those replaced at this point in time? The project would go much faster. There would be less engineering, less disruption if we simply did the sidewalks without the laterals. However, we also have street tree conflicts that are causing problems, as we know, in a number of buildings. And the trees themselves, when they come out, that will create a little more complexity for some of these particular buildings and the adjacent sidewalk.
And when you say laterals, I assume you're talking about sewer laterals.
Well, it's water or sewer. I don't know if the sewer is in the front. I assume it is, right? Okay. So what we're observing is we have old buildings. The laterals probably have not been updated for decades, if not longer.
Probably
scores of decades.
Some of them are those old clay laterals, I suspect.
Yeah, I just think it would be better to have like a pre-program where we could get in and do those, rather than putting down a nice sidewalk and then coming back and ripping it up, for individual problems.
Right.
No, you wouldn't want to. Yeah.
All right.
So one final thought on the facade improvements. We want to make sure that also that any facade improvements that we process, that those can be done expeditiously. So part of this effort also is taking a look internally at the processes that we have at the city, and making sure that over-the-counter type of, a paint, whether it's a paint job or a window replacement or something that should be quick, doesn't take weeks or months to obtain a permit for. So to continue strategies related to place, a complementary project that would come with the downtown project and the public engagement would include a discussion about wayfinding signage. This is directional signage to direct pedestrians and vehicles to different locations within town, whether it's parking or restrooms or destinations like a classy city hall. Some cities also take an opportunity to share a little bit about their history, and so we imagine that there could be ways that we tell a little story about our own history within that same context. Continuing here on the parking study, this is something that has already been funded, and I should mention that a number of these initiatives are essentially floating within the work plan of the city, and this strategy takes those floaters and also a few new ideas and packages them together into this downtown economic strategy. This is one of those that's happening now and will be launched soon, and will identify additional opportunities through this particular study. And there will be spin-offs, we imagine, that come from that parking study, whether it's ideas on how we look at the existing built environment and think about it differently and perhaps find some parking spaces, or ideas on new locations for parking. So that will be coming soon. The Kosmont study recommended taking a look at Money Way and that corridor as a potential special destination. Advantages include you don't have semi-trucks running up and down the street, where it would make it maybe more difficult for a business to have a cafe presence on the sidewalk. But a corridor, whether it's Money Lane, Railroad, or Oak, these are adjacent streets that may also be suitable for some streetscape improvements that are consistent with the improvements that we would consider adding to Main Street. And so the idea here is that additional infrastructure, whether it's surface treatment of Money Way, for example, just the surface itself, or identifying ways to containerize in limited containers all of the various roll-off bins that we have there today and discreetly hide those, enhance that pedestrian corridor. Same idea with Railroad and Oak Avenue. Are there ways to beautify those corridors and create a better pedestrian experience for our visitors and our citizens? And the final concept here is that the City Hall parcel, which we're actively talking about and will begin discussing again on Monday the 17th at the fire station at 6 o'clock, relates to the concept that a new building on that site has the potential to serve as an anchor for the northern part of our downtown and bring people to that site, activate that corridor, particularly those businesses immediately north of Adams on both sides of the street. The concept is some form of mixed use, to be defined a little bit later, possibly a vertical building. The Shape Committee recommended a 2 or 3 story building with some form of rooftop concept as well. And so this is something that we also see as a part of a strategy at enhancing our downtown corridor. Okay, in terms of process, just 3 items here, but these are big items. First one here is to improve business certainty by identifying community-supported uses, so we would have a discussion about what these are, that would be permitted by right in the central business and service commercial zoning districts. And some of that work is happening now. So at the Planning Commission meeting, at the last meeting, I think there was a discussion about clothing stores as an example of this, where rather than having a clothing store run through the Planning Commission, and it's a bit of a question mark whether or not they would receive a permit, that would be something that's permitted by right and would not need to go to the Planning Commission. What that also does is save a little staff time and enlarges the pipeline and the capacity of the staff to work on other projects. And so additional ideas would come through that first initiative. Secondly, streamlining the permit process by discontinuing discretionary review for certain permit types. So think awnings, for example. This is just an example, but the idea of awnings or something that signs, something that could be brought to the staff and at the staff level, authorize those so long as the characteristics of what's acceptable have been defined by the legislative body. And some of those ideas are coming to the City Council at your next council meeting on the 25th. And finally, pop-up stores. These are temporary retail spaces that are in many cases an extension of a sidewalk. These are pop-up retail uses can last for an hour, they can last for a week, but generally it's a limited amount of time. We have a number of vacant buildings in downtown. They may be a suitable destination for a temporary retail pop-up concept. But pop-up retail concepts can happen in parking lots, they can happen in parks, they can happen in a number of different locations. It's really up to, it's only limited by our creativity. And a number of other communities are finding this as a way to create an experience that is very attractive to the shoppers today.
Is there a, in terms of a time frame on something like that, on the pop-up retail, so it could go from a short period to 6 months or a year, conceivably?
We think this is something that could actually happen almost immediately. In just looking at different permit processes in other communities, it's pretty easy to replicate these and adjust them for St. Helena, but this is something that typically would go to the Planning Commission first for a recommendation. It would come to the council for a first and second reading. It would be an ordinance, and then a 30-day window. Other communities could, the other option is you could consider an urgency ordinance, which would essentially establish that right now, and it would not need to go to the Planning Commission for a period of time.
So I had one more question, Paul, if I could. Or did you want to?
I thought you wanted to clarify. I think he was talking about the length of time for the pop-up itself. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Well, I was, but I think you're also answering a second question that is, how soon can we get something like this going? And then a store could conceivably be in place longer than a week or a month. It could be a longer term, up to whatever we decide.
Right. It's really up to us how long you see that lasting. It can be a fairly long period of time, but you may not want that. You may want renewal options, things like that.
Okay. Right.
But I think from in terms of the question of how quickly we could produce something like that, we heard earlier that the firefighters have the capability of working 50 hours straight. I'm sure NOAA has that capability too. So I think we could have something ready for you by tomorrow morning. But I do think that this is something. I think this is something that, just looking at a couple of other cities, this is a fairly short policy that just requires some feedback on your preferences, and then we would capture that and put it into an ordinance. The fastest track would be an urgency ordinance. If you're thinking about the idea that perhaps there would be some folks interested in dressing up some of these vacant spaces by the holiday season, that clock is ticking, and the traditional route may not be quick enough to actually see that happen.
Okay, so that would be something that we would want to consider by the next meeting if we wanted to put some kind of urgency ordinance in.
When we get to the timing and prioritization of this, if there was council consensus that this is something we should work on right away, we can get started on that.
Okay.
Can we talk about this one for a while?
Sure.
I mean, I think process, all of this is important. I think process is incredibly important, along with rebranding, which you're going to get to next. And I want to encourage us not to think too small here. I think that changing clothing from one column to another column is good, but I think we have to think beyond that. I think we have to really limit the number of use permits we have, and so we need to talk about it and think about it, and what is it that we really want to regulate and why, and then create standards that are meaningful when something does have to go to the Planning Commission. So they're not just looking at odor and noise, which is what's typically on the list. They have something to look at, like, is this, really repetitive of what we already have, or is it? How does it add to the mix? I just don't want us to do a little job here. I think we really need to do a big one, and we have to tackle formula business. How are we going to regulate it if we're going to regulate it? On the pop-up, I think pop-up is the word, and we have to have something that doesn't take you 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get your pop-up permit, or you're never going to pop up in time. And so we need some kind of, what you bring to us, I would hope would have some criteria that's not so fuzzy, so that when it comes to you, hopefully, you could approve it, and this sort of thing doesn't go to the Planning Commission, or maybe in certain circumstances it might come to the council. But
I think I generally endorse Ms. Koberstein's comments, with the overall objective being to push much more into the permitted use category. All right.
I would say easier said than done.
Yes, the devil's in the details.
You don't want to have a pop-up restaurant in front of a restaurant. There are going to be all kinds of different things like, whoa, what's going on here? So
well,
it's
maybe for 1 week.
Well, I've got a question. Are there examples in our area that we could visit to see how that works? And
when we bring you, if you're interested in pop-up moving quickly, we can bring you copies of sample ordinances in other communities and programs. In fact, we can send you links probably within a week of a few different
that'd be great.
Pop-up programs in the region, so that you have a sense of what those look like, and meanwhile begin working on a concept for us.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that bringing in some models, because as Mr. Doring said, there could be some conflicts or cross pollination or something that was unintended, but if other communities had models, that would be great to look at.
Sure.
I think we don't want to over-regulate it, though, because you could control the time, the length of time, if you're really concerned, I think, about competition. And people are going to pop up where there are places to pop up. And so if you got a vacant store, that's the most likely place for it to happen. And so if somebody wants to do a little food thing in there and there happens to be food next door, I would hope we could have some criteria that it still makes it possible. Maybe it's not a year-long permit, but we're not going to be able to control the space that much, I don't think. And so we need to have a way to work through those issues, or we will have no pop-ups.
And when we look at these other communities, they are quick over-the-counter type permits. They really will not wait. And if we don't have a permit process like that, it would be inconsistent with what you see in other communities with these types of permit processes. So jumping into people, this is, again, cultivating and reinforcing historic downtown's reputation as a distinctive destination. The vision here is that we leverage the investments in the infrastructure and the process changes to refresh the branding and reputation of downtown, cultivate customers for our businesses. So the first item here also correlates with our housing strategy and the ideas that are, many of the ideas that are coming out of the white paper. But the idea here, and this is not new in a lot of communities, downtowns are reinvesting in housing to encourage mixed use, which creates a customer for our downtown merchants. It takes cars off the street because they can walk to their amenities, and in many cases they become affordable units that then also serve to take cars off the street because they can serve the businesses that we know in the city. We have a net import of a little over 3,000 jobs, and so 3,000 people are driving into town every day. While this would be a small offset. This downtown's not that large, but there probably are some opportunities to promote some infill housing, identify some incentives that would cultivate projects like that, and in some cases reimagine underutilized properties. Second initiative here would be to enhance our community event programming in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. There have been events in the past. Cheers is one of those. This doesn't suggest to reopen the same concept, but to consider other programming, perhaps experiential, so people that they're not just coming to watch something, they're actually participating, whatever that is. Perhaps these, whether it's a recurring concept or a concept that would be a couple of days in duration, where someone comes, engages, and then takes an opportunity to shop, etc., participate in the community. That type of community event programming often is targeted for some of the lower shopping seasons to help sustain the merchants throughout the year. So we know they're going to do really well in the summer. They're going to do great in harvest season. But what about the beginning of the year or some of the winter months? Is there some programming that could be done to not only sustain community but sustain businesses during the down periods? In terms of refreshing branding and the reputation of downtown, this is again one of those initiatives I was initially thinking, well, as the process changes come to bear, those are opportunities to brand and tell the story. As the infrastructure improvements take place, there are opportunities to tell the story. But I think the story begins now. There's an opportunity to refresh this branding now, and there'll be opportunities to add to that story as different changes take place, whether they're process or infrastructure. And so this is something that probably is immediate, near term, and long term, but certainly can be done sooner rather than later. The fourth idea here is more of an internally focused concept, and with the emerging technology opportunities, there are online marketing portals for communities, cities that are, in some cases, have an economic development department. They're using online portals like this to connect to real estate investors and others, businesses that are looking for vacant commercial space that might have certain characteristics. Are they looking for a space that's 2,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet? What type of lease? What type of locale? What zip code or destination within the country are they looking for? So there's a tool that is about $5,000 that we could literally set up an account quickly. It's going to be going through an upgrade in terms of its capacity and capability within about 3 weeks. And the vision here is that the Kosmont team could serve as an ambassador for the city for inquiries, initial inquiries, and we could profile some of our commercial space on there as an assist to the business community with the effort to try to fill those spaces up as quickly as possible. And of course, we can evaluate whether it's working if it's a small initial investment, but could land us some tenants down the road. Another concept that came out of the Kosmont study is the observation that businesses today, these retail businesses that are competing with Amazon and the online market and international competition and the ability to literally deliver goods to our doorstep tomorrow, successful businesses are finding ways to market their wares, their goods, not only in brick and mortar, but also on other platforms. So whether it's social media or an online store, there are strategies that successful businesses are using, and they're finding that they're able to sustain and increase return customers by using a number of different retail strategies, which this term omni-channel really means multiple retail strategies. And so there's research that indicates that businesses that are communicating with their customers in multiple different ways are finding that the customers are returning. And so you can imagine that perhaps, as they shop, there is a follow-up. They capture an email address. The email address is used to communicate with the customer. How was your experience? That helps them navigate the customer sales experience, but also communicate with the customer about online specials that might be happening in the interim before their return visit, that they can shop online, etc. So the idea here is to provide some training, customized training in workshops for our St. Helena businesses, and also provide perhaps some technical assistance from time to time on a case-by-case basis to businesses that are looking to build different retail strategies.
Would that be done through the involvement of the Kosmont companies as well?
Yes. And so what we would envision is that they would be providing the workshops and also providing the technical assistance.
I just saw my optometrist yesterday, and she's on the first floor right below my office in Calistoga, and I've already received 3 emails from her asking how the experience was, and I had to laugh at that.
I bet
she
you
could have just walked upstairs and talked to me. It was a good experience.
I bet you're going to be a return customer. So the next item here is this concept of a possible wine train pilot project. So the wine train, as we know, arrives in town on a regular basis. Today, their customers are taken into limo buses and shipped to different wineries in the region. I'm not aware that those vehicles are dropping customers in our downtown, but perhaps there's an opportunity to, in the dual effort of attempting to take cars off the street, which is, they're traveling by train, so this doesn't increase traffic, but it's a way of connecting those customers with our merchants. The idea would be to either have those vehicles transport their customers to the downtown, or alternatively some stopping point where they can walk from the train tracks to the downtown. So this would, the concept here is also a 24-month period, perhaps check-ins every 6 months to see how this is going, and explore whether that's had a material impact on the businesses, what they're reporting, how might we adjust the concept. But if it's a pilot project, it allows you to consider the concept and test it before and before something would become permanent. Under hotel considerations, this is the Kosmont study. This is the downtown retail market analysis. Suggested the city consider allowing a high-end hotel development near Main Street to help downtown merchants. And we know that there's one hotel project that is approved that's not too far away, that's probably walking distance. But the concept here also is that an observation is that the city owns a couple of parcels within walking distance of downtown that may potentially serve as a catalyst for the business, the merchants downtown, and also have the ancillary business of, or contribution of contributing some additional resources to the city's general fund. And for whether it's sustained or enhanced services, or some of the projects that are forthcoming with respect to concepts of a new city hall or a new community recreation facility. So the 2 parcels would be the parcel that the city owns on Railroad and also the Adams Street parcel. And in terms of the Adams Street parcel, really both of them, certainly with the Adams Street parcel, the concept here is that perhaps the hotel concept could be smaller in scale than whatever was discussed about a year ago, a little over a year ago, where I think there were some fairly large investment concepts considered and discussed a little more than a year ago. This concept was discussed with the SHAPE committee, and there were a number of comments about retaining the community's interest in some form of community space on that parcel. But there were also ideas related to a smaller scale concept that may be discrete on that parcel. And finally, the last concept here just maintaining a safe, clean, and comfortable downtown environment. It's really, did I miss one? I'm sorry. I missed an important one. Parklets. These are extensions of sidewalk. If you've been to San Francisco recently, a lot of creative ideas with parklets. They can serve as cafe space for a restaurant that maybe has small square footage and expands their footprint. These are spaces that could just be a respite for a pedestrian walking down the street. Could have plants as part of that. It could be artistic. Again, we're constrained only by our vision, and there are really no limits to how that could take place. In the prior city I worked in, there was a parklet that was placed in the historic downtown. It took up 2 parking spaces, and it was just essentially a park. It was space with benches and tables and umbrellas for the community to stop and read a book, listen to music, etc.
Is that something that would have to wait for the sidewalk program, or could be implemented sooner?
No, this is something that could be implemented sooner. And in most cities, these are concepts that would be paid for. It would be desired by a business and paid for by a business. In Sacramento, I think the numbers were about $20,000 for something like this. We would need to identify a cost and develop a fee for something like this, what the cost would be. But if I remember correctly, the cost in Sacramento was probably about $20,000 per parking space and parklet, and paid for by the business. In other communities, the city may want to invest in a space and pay for it itself. And so, again, there are different options on how these might work. And just as with the pop-up concept, there are a number of very, very good parklet policies that other communities have thought a lot about and developed, and I think would be easy to replicate for us.
So theoretically, Hunt Street from Main to Railroad could be a parklet, correct?
Absolutely. And whether you take the whole street or a part of the street, different concepts there. Sometimes these parklets also serve as a traffic calming consideration. So if you're constraining the roadway, the visual for the driver is that they feel a need to slow down. And so we might think about how they might also serve as a traffic calming strategy for different parts of different corridors.
I'm also thinking, I wonder if there are any models of something that's mobile, that could be in one spot and then move to another. It's just something to think about if you're looking at models, or maybe there's something.
Mm-hmm. So the final item here relates to making sure that our downtown is safe, clean, and comfortable. And the point here is when we invest in our infrastructure, we want to make sure that we're taking care of it. We want to make sure it's polished and looking good. As I told the Public Works Department today, they were sampling a street sweeper, a new street sweeper, and we were looking at how it cleaned up gutters, etc. And my comment was, I want to be able to eat off the streets after that vehicle drives by. Same idea with our downtown. We want it to be as clean as possible. We want to create an inviting environment for our visitors and our pedestrians. Right. And I know that when we build this sidewalk project in particular, we want to make sure we take care of it. So we need to be prepared to do that, and I'll be bringing you a recommendation to reorg the Public Works Department later this year, with the idea that we have dedicated focus on certain areas that potentially can be enhanced, and to prepare us to take on new buildings and new environments.
All right.
So this is just a summary of a guideline for how we might organize these tonight. Cindy has indicated that we can do this live if I pause enough. So what we've done is she's built a table that organizes, that will allow us to cut and paste the various initiatives that we've discussed if they if they work for you. And we would place them under immediate, near-term, longer-term, get those organized tonight, and bring you back a final document later. The other question that we have for you is this the right list? Are we missing anything? Are there adjustments that you would like to make to the recommended strategies? So we're defining immediate as will be complete within 6 months. A good example of that might be the bathroom project, right? So the bathroom project, we're planning to, I think we're out to bid now, and planning to head to construction within probably 6 weeks or so. Near term would be completed within 12 months, so maybe that's it's going to take 6 to 12 months to finish that. And something longer term might be the sidewalk project itself. Even though we're starting it now, it will take more than 12 months to complete the engineering, work with Caltrans, et cetera.
Well, does it make sense at this point to open this up to public comment, and then we'll go back and try and talk about what the council feels its priorities are?
I have a question. My name is Bobby Monette, and I'm speaking as a citizen. I talked to the wine train like 2 or 3 years ago when they changed their business model and added the little cars. And I know that, I'm not clear, but I wasn't sure of the ADA facilities that they had on the train. I think they have a lift on the big train, but I'm not positive of that. And they didn't have anything on the little cars that stopped to go into the wineries. So I'm just wondering if we allow the wine train to stop, and unload, are we going to be required to provide the ADA, equipment or whatever? I just think, unless they may have changed, they sold since then, so they might have ADA stuff on their cars now, but they didn't when I talked to them a couple of years ago. And then I was also wondering, I guess the parklets won't be on Main Street, or if they are, would that involve Caltrans? Or is it just not to be happening on Main Street, or how does that work? Just wondering.
All right. Do you want to respond to that? Or do we know the answer to that?
I actually don't know the answer regarding Caltrans and working with them, but that could be a limitation.
Further public comment? Ms. Dell?
The thing is, there's nothing to do here. I mean, you've talked about you want hotels for people to stay here, and I understand that. And we have some very fine restaurants. We have some very fine stores. But if I'm going to go on a vacation, I want to do something other than taste wine. I mean, you can do about 3 wineries in one day, and that's should be the limit for most people. But if you're staying in a hotel, gee whiz, you want to do something in the evening besides go to dinner. And every time I go to Silos in Napa, which is a very, very small jazz club, could fit nicely into one of 3 empty spaces that we have downtown. I'm so envious. And they don't just have little, I'm going to call them pop-up bands that various wineries and folks have around in front of their businesses. They have real talented entertainers. And I have to believe if I'll drive from St. Helena to Napa to hear that kind of music, that people will drive from Calistoga to St. Helena, and they'll maybe drive even from Napa up here. If you have something like that, I mean, and I've heard this over and over from people who move into St. Helena, and I'm old. I mean, what do you think about young people? I mean, surely they want something to do, and I'm amazed that the Kosmont folks didn't hit on that at all. It didn't come to that conclusion at all, because really we need something to do.
I thought the Kosmont folks actually talked about the need to combine an experience with folks, for folks that are visiting here, please. I remember them talking about
right.
So the word, I can't get it out. Experiential.
Experiential was a term that they used, and the reference was to the trends in shopping, particularly among younger crowds. But the the statement was that they are seeking experiences, and communities that cultivate experiences often reap those rewards.
Yes, please.
Hi, Susan Kenward. My husband and I own a small wine business here in St. Helena. And I just put this together at the back table, so it's not terribly organized. I think, I want to thank you. I think what the group, Mark and everyone has put together is absolutely amazing and is really inspiring. There's one thing, though, that keeps coming to my mind, that we need a collaboration between the city officials and the council and the chambers. But I also think that we need to bring in the local businesses and the citizens to develop what I'm going to call a activation trends plan. That's a new term in marketing. Sort of a 360-degree integrated approach to promote visitors and build a sense of community. I had 2 retail stores in my life, and I've also had another business that I sold online. And I feel that that one of the things that we're not talking about, well, we are. I mean, Pat said something, too, about relevancy and vibrancy in our town. It's not just to existing shoppers, but we've also got to think about the future. In other words, how do we create energy in the town? All of these things that you're doing are absolutely important, but if there's not a sense of energy, we're sort of stuck in the same place. And you spoke to that it's really important in the retail environment for consumers need something other than just a reason to purchase a product. Because if you just need to purchase a product, you buy it at Amazon. You need some other reason to come here to buy things and have an experience. And I really don't think that the city should have to fix it all. I don't think that the Chamber of Commerce and the city should have to fix it all. I think that the people that have businesses in this community are so talented. We have so many creative people in the town that we could also come up with our own ideas. And I think that one of the things that would really help, and I know we're all here old and we have gray hair, but social media is something that is really a social media campaign would be a worthy campaign that I would like to challenge all the other businesses to join me in developing and implementing. Because I believe there's a real opportunity for us to draw people here by a special social media sort of campaign, which I'm calling #Main Street St. Helena. And it's something that we can do right away, and that if we get together as me in front of Behringer, Susan, #Main Street St. Helena, it benefits me, it benefits my winery, it benefits St. Helena, and that if we all work together, we could come up with some real things that we could do to get art installations. We're doing the Winter Park. So there are so many creative ideas that if we could get together and work on it, I think we could #Main Street St. Helena. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tracy Sweeney, 1407 Kearney Street. Speaking as Behringer again. I'm just commenting on Pat Dell's request for something to do, and I just wanted to remind the community that we do offer music, similar to bands that play at Silos, complimentary for anyone living in Napa Valley. So you can come, you can drink wine or not drink wine. It's on us. It used to be 2 days a weekend, but it's now just one, due to a very small handful of folks who didn't appreciate music in town. But 12 to 4, and hope to see you in the first glass of wine's on us. We're a daytime operation. We're 12 to 4, and we are walking distance. We're closer than Silos.
Yes.
Good evening. I think this is a great thing the city's doing. It's a long time overdue. My negative comments, so take them with good criticism, please. First, on the Moneyway. That is a delivery route for all the trucks in town. We have a business on Main Street, deliveries in the back. There are fire lanes there. All the businesses parked back there. To turn that into a pedestrian walkway, I think is pretty crazy, but that's just my opinion. If you go there, there's That's where the delivery trucks go because they can't deliver on Main Street. On the signs, about 3 years ago, I bought a sign proposal to the chamber. They didn't like it. I took the model because one of our business owners in our buildings lives in Hillsburg, and Hillsburg had great signage on every corner, not for individual churches and parks, but for all the businesses that are on Oak Avenue and on Railroad Avenue. Nobody knows where the library is unless you put signage. Nobody knows where the Catholic Church is unless you do that signage. Nobody knows where our ice cream store is on Oak Street because we can't put any signage on Main Street at the present time. Now about the project digging up Main Street for the sidewalks. As a retired 35-year contractor in St. Helena, you are not going to complete that project in 1 year. You're going to go from the bridge at Sulphur Creek to Pine Street, tearing up all the sidewalks, and from our experience of 3 years ago, the tree that was there flooded our building twice, flooded the inside. We took the tree out. It was cut down in about an hour, but it took the city 2 weeks to dig out the stump because it's in around all the pipes that are in the ground. There's a 4-inch gas line that we found there that runs on that side street on the west side. Our water line was so rusted, but because it wasn't broke, we could only fix the sewer. The city said, well, we'll fix it when it breaks for us. Well, that's great. Then we'll be out of water. But they didn't. But all those services are so rusted out, and you're going to have to fix all those out to the street. You're going to have to dig up the street because this time you're poured concrete, not pavers, that we could just remove, fix the pipe. Now, when you do that perm concrete, you don't want to be saw cutting that every year when every pipe breaks in town. And that is going to be about 3 times your budget probably that you've got budgeted for this project. And the merchants are going to be out of business for that summer, if you start in March or whenever you do, because you got to take out all the trees are in around, all the cables in the ground. It's going to be a very tedious process. Like I said, the city, it took them 2 weeks to dig out the stump because they couldn't do it with a backhoe. Because if you pull it out, the 4-inch gas line comes out, or the water line comes out, or the sewer line comes out, and plus all the other cables in there. But I'm glad the city has finally taken an initiative to fix the downtown, and I hope, this is my opinion only, they get rid of all the trees. We have beautiful buildings downtown, very old historic buildings. And they're beautiful, but those trees have wrecked most of the buildings. They're all black. The awnings are messed up. I mean, I'm glad the city is willing to help those people fix that because you caused the problem. Back about 50 years ago, when my dad ran the business, the pastime there, Mayor John Aukla came to all the merchants and said, if you let us plant trees downtown, we'll take care of them. 4 years later, it went back to the building owners. Now it's our responsibility to do everything. It was a bad move on the city, and I know a lot of us who were here, we have a bad taste in our mouth to trust the city anymore. But I am glad that the city is going to do this project, but it is going to be very disruptive to the merchants. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further public comment?
Good evening, everyone. Wayne Armstrong, Main Street, 23 years in. Wow. I just want to say that I think this is such a positive development that we are all looking at making our downtown better, not just for the businesses, but for everyone who lives here. I think that so much of what's being discussed is a net positive, from sidewalk repair to identifying parking, bathrooms, hallelujah, for a lot of us out there have been begging for these for a long time. So I just want to encourage you that I think that we're really on the right track. Kind of the particulars of what we do and when necessarily will involve public input, but I just want to encourage you that I think we're really moving in a good direction. The empirical evidence that we need to do something is in all of the empty buildings, which we see around us, and obviously the change in the tenor of business that we've also, those of us on Main Street have experienced. The thing is, we have this beautiful place, and frankly, it's one of the reasons that Marcus and I have loved living here for the time that we've been here. St. Helena is fantastic, and so we can't get too lost in the weeds of what we need to fix without identifying the fact that we have a great basis to build from. So again, in terms of what is immediate and what is midterm, long-term, I'll give more thought to that and can offer some suggestion. But I think that this is a very positive thing. I would just like to ask if there is a possibility that we can look, Mark, at taking pieces of the project and pulling parts of them out. So for example, the sidewalk repair, which I think we are understanding here is a really big project involving lots of things that you can't see and lots of ancient infrastructure that will have to be addressed. The fact is that those trees that you mentioned are really ripping up the sidewalk, and we all know that. So what's happening for Marcus and I, so we're on two sides of Main Street, and we see literally people tripping on those crazy pavers every day. And poor Marcus, the other day, a very elderly lady literally tripped in front of the store, and she came to find him. Young man, do you know about the sidewalk? And he was scared to lie. Yeah? How long has it been like this? A while. While. So anyway, I will not give you a lecture, counselors, on your legal exposure to what can be a disastrous event. But I will just encourage you that could we not look at the huge sidewalk project, but could we fix those bricks that are literally going to make you fall and knock your teeth out of your head? So could we, before 2021, like next week, 2018, could you get out there and diggy, and I mean, there's got to be a way. So I mean, all joking aside, it's really important for us to not look at these broad infrastructure projects that can only be addressed when the grant money becomes available, in 3 years from now. I think that it would be great if we could just look a little bit more strategically at what we might do now. It's good for business. It's good for every single person who lives here, who walks on Main Street. And I think that those pieces are digestible if we can look at them a little bit, as I said, more strategically. So thank you so much. I'm excited about all of this happening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question, Mark? With that idea, knowing that those are pavers that can come up separately, is there a way or some place that's done it where, excuse me, they can come up by section and we can do some sort of, shaving down and evening out that wouldn't be completely, comprehensive, but we look at the areas that need it the most? Is that a possibility?
I think we're going to need to work with the engineering side of the house and look at the issues of the condition of these pipes, talk about there's a business impact with just getting in early and then doing it twice, so to speak. And so those are good conversations for us to have with the engineering analysis that will take place. And I'll be the first to look into, the quicker we can do these things, and to the extent we can phase it with the pavers now, where they can be put back relatively quickly without a lot of hiccup. And to the extent that, I think we need to explore that concept with the designer, the engineering folks that will look at that. I'm told by our staff that even a small root that's a 1/4 inch will create a fairly large buckle. It'll look like a large root underneath the bricks, but it can be just a small little 1/4 inch, root that's impacting the bricks. And I do think that there was some diggy that happened, maybe even this afternoon, near one of those businesses. No? Okay, I was told different. But this week, I think we're going to be taking care of some of those. I walked the downtown yesterday, and with a staff member who will be looking at some of those areas, and I think there are some areas that create more risk than others that we can work on now and not wait. And that's important for us to make sure that we create an environment that is as safe as possible between now and the real project.
Good, thank you.
Hello, Armstrong. Hello. So, again, 23 years in. So, it's happened many, many times. So, the pavers come out, Jeff, they try to grind, resand. So, it's happened many times. What I'm trying to impress upon you is that there are varying degrees of the uneven cobbles that work through the sidewalk. And I mean, it's Main Street, you guys, so you know this. This is not, it's not a mystery. What I'm trying to say is that there are certain parts, and I could certainly walk it with you to let you know, where they're hazardous to the point that people really do trip repeatedly through the day. And so all I'm saying is I understand we cannot address all of these areas, but there are some areas in particular that are so obviously, well, not obviously unless you're looking, you don't see them, but they're obviously protruding where it really does trip you. So it's those things that I would like to just ask, can we try to get down and grind or whatever it is that has to happen? And really, beating a horse dead, really sooner than later.
Okay, yeah, I think we all acknowledge that. Yes, please. Ms. Bradshaw.
Hi, Vicki Bradshaw. I'm a resident of St. Helena. I actually have some experience with sidewalks and city trees. First of all, I think what you're doing on the Main Street is wonderful. I think Main Street should be our priority. I have a city tree in front of my house. It lifted up the sidewalk at least this much. I tried for a year to get a permit to take that portion out and put a new one in, but because they needed an arborist to come out and look at the tree, and the arborist just retired, I finally just hired somebody to come shave it. So there is a possibility of shaving as a temporary solution, and it saves all kinds of problems. So maybe you don't have to look at replace, but just get somebody to come shave some of this stuff as a temporary measure.
Okay. Is there further public comment? All right, let me close the public comment, and we'll turn to prioritization discussion, which I think is where we are. I must say, in terms of sidewalks and what's under sidewalks, mayors I've talked to at conferences absolutely underscore that the costs of these are always 2 or 3 times at least what you think they're going to be. And hearing about a gas line, if it's on the west side of Main Street, is obviously a very difficult, complicating factor that will slow you down.
Could I just make one comment before we start?
Sure.
I think this project is going along great so far. We initiated it not even quite a year ago. And for people who aren't aware, it's part of our way of doing things that involve the community, get information to people so they understand the issues, and then hopefully we can all come together and make a decision. And that's the way the SHAPE process started after what I would call semi-disaster that we had at the end of the RFP process. And that's what we're doing here. And I personally resent the attempt to politicize this and talk about how people vote or have voted without knowing what we've really been doing for the last year. If we're going to talk about who's voted, the fact is we all turned down a small business in downtown 3 meetings ago, perhaps, the Green Bionics business. And we make a judgment, based on what we each think is appropriate. And I'm hearing a lot of things that are being said. It's obviously a political moment. But how somebody has voted on one thing is not an indicator of how we think about this particular project. It's an important project. We put it on the board last year to do, recognizing that there was more to do than the sidewalks. There was more than the infrastructure. We had to do the people and the process part of it. And I think we've come a long way. And I don't think it's helpful to retreat into the camps of us versus them and talk about it that way. I'd like to see us work on it together and try to get it accomplished.
Well, I think we're here to try and set priorities, and that's what I would like to do. And maybe I would make one quick comment, which is I tend to agree with the comment on Money Way, and I would put that as a very low priority. I think there's a lot more that we need to get to before we try and deal with Money Way. I'm not talking now about Telegraph Way, but Money Way itself. That is a major delivery route, and I think it would be quite complex and difficult to make that into a pedestrian walk. Maybe it's possible, but I would put that low on the priority.
So just for purposes of organizing the discussion, the plan will be to start with place and walk through the various initiatives and then take them one by one in order. But in terms of Money Way, let me make sure my comments are clarified and clear. The concept there was not to shut down, vehicle traffic through that corridor. When I use the word pedestrian, I'm talking about making sure a pedestrian can walk through there and perhaps have a different experience than they have today. So instead of looking at 25 trash cans, they don't see any trash cans. Instead of seeing many different forms of concrete on the surface, there's a single form of surface treatment that looks better. Perhaps there are monument features that communicate to the pedestrian that they've walked into a special place. And so I think there's a lot of ideas that could be had with that particular space, and that's why we talk about that in the context of Railroad and Oak Avenue as well, and probably Hunt and Adams. These are corridors that could have consistent enhancements to the streetscape throughout the entire downtown. So just wanted to clarify some of those comments.
Yeah, okay, thank you for those comments. And I think they're very much right on, but I think we also have to think in terms of when we are doing this very difficult and complex and time-consuming sidewalk replacement project, wouldn't it be great for the back of the house to be able to allow people in to their businesses if they have that kind of pedestrian thoroughfare that looks nice? I mean, to me, I think I agree with what you're saying in terms of, it seems like it is sort of for deliveries, but if we think about the intrusion that's going to happen, activating Money Way might be a necessity for some businesses. So I think I would look at it a little differently. I just offer that.
Yeah. Well, you want to start with place and just...
So, yes, what we would recommend is we take these one by one, and it might be helpful to move them quickly to each of the three options and then look at the final product and adjust from there. And so with each of these, I think some of these, obviously are going to be seeing things that we can start now. Others will take a little more time. But the idea of completing the downtown sidewalk and streetscape project would be something that we would recommend take more than 12 months, put it in the longer term category, even though the work truly begins in 2018.
Yeah,
agreed.
And so what we're going to do is have Cindy cut and paste these into a chart that's also attached.
This
Okay,
is
so there it is.
watch.
She's very quick. Okay, so now we'll go back to the second one, which is...
While you're still... Where did you just put the sidewalk program?
It's on the bottom, should be on. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I thought she was cutting it and pasting it and putting it somewhere.
And so I think we have some consensus to move that first one into longer term.
It could go in all three places.
Yeah, there are phases of this, and there are things that I think we should start to do
keep it moving forward
now.
Yeah,
the minor repairs, and I do think we should study whether we can do all these laterals before or during the other thing. I think there is some work that should be done immediately.
To me, a way to maybe kind of think of it is that the sidewalk project is the big main theme of what we're doing. So that would start now and begin, and we layer in as the other elements, but with the concept that this is the main thread.
So Cindy, why don't we put this in all three spots, and then we can rephrase this between now and the next meeting to document the different phases of the project.
Can I ask just this one question?
Sure.
That is, given what we know to be the significant underground issues, I assume, maybe I'm wrong about this, that there will be an engineering firm that seeks to identify those and tell us what they are and what the complications are in advance of the actual sidewalk project. And so the question I have is, what is the time frame within which we can get that engineering study done, because that's going to have a large impact, I said, on cost.
Right, that's part of the planning, and so when we start to plan this and begin to assess the condition of the sidewalks and what's underneath, we'll have to wait until, in some cases, we'll have to wait until that analysis is finished to understand how much time it will take to complete these improvements and how best to complete the improvements without disruption to the best of our ability.
Yeah.
And in terms of funding for this, the 1.2 may not be enough, but I think the staff report alludes to the fact that there may be additional resources needed to complete complementary streetscape improvements, and these could be very significant costs, but in costs that I think that the city longer term will be able to sustain. So we've placed the sidewalk project in all three time periods because there are different phases to that. The pedestrian alley beautification is something that would start with this consultant that we hire. So this would be basically a firm that would help have a conversation about streetscape improvements and then also work on the engineering side of this. And the alley beautification, I would recommend occur early and start with this discussion.
Should it be initially focused on Telegraph Avenue, since that's going to be the avenue to the
restrooms?
To the restrooms.
That's the first one that it makes sense to make that the first one, but I think you have at least 4 corridors. We do need to deal with, there is a question about ownership on some of these. Who owns the fee title to the parcel? Is the property owner? Is it a corridor that is a pedestrian corridor, or is it privately owned? If it's privately owned, is the property owner willing to work with the city? Most of the time, there aren't fences up that are keeping people out. There are corridors that are, in some cases, pretty wide. So there are some questions that we'll need to follow up on with each of those alleys. But I've counted at least 4 that would be interesting to activate, if you will, with art or other amenities.
Mm-hmm. Is that same firm, would they be developing the wayfinding signage program?
They could.
So those two
right.
things kind of go together like a whole urban design program?
You could spin off wayfinding, but I think that the firm that we would be hiring can do all of this type of work, and it would be good to have them do it as one comprehensive package.
Mm-hmm.
So facade and the downtown facade and tenant improvement program, there'll be some policy choices for you on this, but this is something that we could do relatively quickly if you were interested in launching a program like that.
I think as soon as we can.
Yeah, they are, yes.
I noticed some
I
stuff.
have mixed feelings about it. Exactly, it maybe has many objectives, beautifying the place and maybe trying to get some tenants in the building. But I tend to think that that sort of program is usually a discussion between the landlord and the tenant. Who is going to pay for the tenant improvements? Who's going to pay for the facade? And I'm in favor of expediting the permit process. People want to change the exterior. It shouldn't take too long to come to the city. But I'm not sure it's going to solve our vacancy problem. I look more towards the marketing portal that's in the next section as something that could really help us get our vacant space online and have people know it's there. So I kind of put this one, I like the idea of a quick permit process for somebody who wants to do something, but I'm in the middle on this one.
Well, would you consider breaking it up such that maybe launch downtown facade program is perhaps sooner than the tenant improvement program?
Yeah.
And the only reason the tenant improvements, I added that because I saw it as I recognize, and this is an issue that came up in conversations with the business community when I provided a briefing to them, but the observation was it is a discussion generally between the landlord and the tenant, and just in researching researching a facade improvement program in other communities, I'm aware that there are local communities within this, not within Napa Valley, but Northern California, that have tenant improvement programs for vacant spaces. And so it's included here as an idea because you may see it as a way to accelerate trying to fill up some of these spaces. On the other hand, the businesses that are considering St. Helena may not need a dollar-for-dollar match on something like this. So I brought this to you as a policy choice. And if you want to separate it, we can bring you the various options, and you can choose at a subsequent council meeting what makes sense on the menu to move forward with and which to maybe postpone or consider later. The other consideration here will be we have limited resources probably for this program.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the vision here is maybe you can take care of 3 or 4 buildings a year when I think about the budget constraints.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to hear from the businesses and the landlords about this, where they would put it on the priority list. I certainly think cleaning some of the buildings is an important thing to do, and people should be able to change their awnings without a whole lot of hurdles at the city. But I don't have a sense of how important this is to launch right away.
Well, wouldn't we know if we launched it and the business community either showed support for it or not? They would have to share in the cost. I think if you make it available for these folks to consider, and it would be up to them to do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's not that complicated to launch something like this, is it? I'm just talking about the facades, not so much tenant improvements.
No, they would need to meet certain criteria, and it would be a dollar-for-dollar match, probably a reimbursement process, very similar to a cost-sharing program on sidewalks.
I think it's a worthwhile something to put together a policy for, and it's something that we could do immediately.
You're talking
at
about
least
the facade side.
Yeah, or just make a policy for both of those, and to where it's available moving forward. I think all of these ideas that are in the strategy are worthwhile to move on. It's just how soon. But if it's just a policy change, or something to bring back to the council to say, okay, this is it, we'll move forward.
Is there a downside to creating a policy for the tenant improvement program at the same time? Is there you're seeing?
I just see everything's going to be in the 6-month category, and I think
Not a bad idea.
I think that we really have to focus on what are the most important things that we have to start now.
Right.
And recognizing the limitations of trying to get the work actually done. And I would put this in the intermediate category myself. We still got to get the design guidelines done. I think there are more important things to do in the next 6 months than this, but that's just one person.
I think it might be worthwhile for the city manager to talk with Jeff Feeney and see what his reaction is to a tenant improvement program. I look at Goodman's, for example. I mean, that's been improved completely. It's not rented out, but huge dollars put into improvement. The other commercial spaces where I peer in the window mostly look like they're in pretty good shape. It's just they're not being rented out for various reasons. But we do, I think, as a city, have a strong interest in the facade and making our city look a little spiffier. And if that helps with some businesses, that seems to me to be more of the priority.
There.
I think workload is a consideration. I think there are a few buildings that probably would benefit, and this may be the incentive a business needs to invest in a paint job, particularly upstairs, or an awning that may be a little tired that they're waiting on because maybe there are fewer pedestrians walking in the stores, and so I think the 6 to 12 month period, if we were able to get there quicker, we can, would be a nice fit for us. And then on the other initiative that we talk about on Monday, there will be some discussion about staffing considerations to help support some of these projects. And we may want to, some of these initiatives could move a little faster with a little more capacity, but this might be a good one for the 6 to 12 month period. And I did ask the question at one time about, with a business community discussion, and asked if this would be a value to businesses, and I did, or businesses they had, or businesses they knew of, and I didn't have a lot of hands, but I had a few hands.
Okay.
6 to 12 is fine.
6 to 12.
Okay. So the next one should be easy. This is complete downtown restroom project, and we're expecting to finish this within 6 months.
Great.
Okay, that's good.
This would be up to 6. This would be immediate. Wayfinding, probably not immediate.
Does that have to be tied into the sidewalk program and the completion of that before you can put these wayfinding pillars in?
Not necessarily. You can use existing street poles or other infrastructure to, in some cases it's a kiosk. I mean, it will depend. The community will have options to look at from a design perspective, but this is going to take some time to complete. One of the cities I looked at, I think it took them several years, and they documented this discussion on their website. It was a comprehensive program that took you from a freeway to a core main arterial to a sidewalk for both vehicles and pedestrians. But I don't think we're talking about something that comprehensive, but it's something that will take a little time to complete, certainly, and would launch. We could consider it an add-on to the contract with the consultant. So while it wouldn't be their initial phase, it would be something that we could begin a conversation over.
I think whoever is doing this, a component of it might be the sort of temporary directional information that people are going to need when the sidewalk program itself starts. So, maybe this is in the intermediate thing, but we should not only have the, great signage we're going to have in the end, but how are we all going to navigate while the project is going on?
This way.
If we're identifying maybe some areas where signage could go in the interim period, that might help with that. And then my thought also is that if it is helpful for, say, next summer or something where businesses that are around the corner from Main Street, we want some indication. If we, between now and then, identify where those posts are that could be used, maybe we could do some sort of intermediate kind of signage in a limited amount to sort of test drive it a little bit while we're integrating the bigger project with the sidewalks, so that at least we're identifying where signs could go.
And also come up with some kind of uniform signage that, like what's in downtown Napa.
Calistoga, too.
Yeah, and Calistoga. So if we could at least come up with some uniform signage that can be adopted to utilize during those period of time, and then maybe get to something more complex later. So.
Would it be okay to consider placing this in the 6 to 12 month category, the near term? So
I would.
Something has to
take us a little time to get what obviously needs to be a rock star firm to help us with a comprehensive project, but hopefully the design firms out there will be itching to have this opportunity. I think St. Helena will be a treasure opportunity for them. The next one is the parking study, and I think maybe the city planner can help us pick a time on that I'm not sure when that commences.
The council's already authorized the budget for that, and we've already engaged a consultant. So the first two big steps are done, I think putting it in the 6-month category, at least to initiate the process, is absolutely appropriate.
Okay.
But when you say initiate the process, what does that mean as opposed to complete the study?
Well, so the same consultant that we've tasked with conducting the parking study is also assisting with the general plan. So, and their work is essentially staggered. They will begin the parking study after they complete the traffic analysis that goes into the general plan EIR. So, I do anticipate that coming to a conclusion relatively quickly, but then responding to comments. Their input is going to be required up until the EIR is adopted, or at least shortly before, and then they'll be able to pivot to that. But I do believe that would occur in early 2019.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the next one is would be envisioned with that same firm that begins with a sidewalk project, but to evaluate potential streetscape improvements to Moneyway, Railroad, and Oak Avenue. So similar to the sidewalk project, but maybe a little bit farther out.
To me, I think we should start looking sooner at least somewhat beautification of those areas that could come from. It doesn't have to be completely comprehensive, but maybe looking at, as you're saying, can we figure out a way to have a little bit more subtle on the approach on the garbage bins? If the bathroom is being built and we think about people walking back there, what do they see this way and that way? And maybe there are some safety considerations too. Somebody just recently got into an accident on Moneyway pulling out of business, and somebody was coming around the corner, so maybe could we look at that a little? And a comment was brought up at the Cameo yesterday about Railroad Avenue. If there is a consideration of a pilot program on the wine train, and the wine train's coming in, what are they seeing? So we want to look at it from that perspective and say, hey, we want the approach to be as nice as it can be in a medium term. So, at least in my opinion, it's something we can start working on, looking at as we move with the big sidewalk project. That's just my opinion on it.
I think Railroad in particular has some opportunity for beautification without a lot of work that could really dress that corridor up that today looks very tired.
Yeah, in reference to your comment, Mr. Ellsworth, were you thinking also of the alley that goes behind the stores south of Hunt Avenue? I mean, that's what you see from the wine train.
Yeah. So as the wine train comes into town, if we looked as if we were on the train from where it comes in, and I've traveled on the trains all around the country. It's kind of interesting. It comes up, and you see the backside of a town. It's like, wow. So if we know that that's what they're seeing, what can we do to address it the whole way that they're seeing?
So basically from the Sulphur Creek Bridge up.
Yeah, and I don't think it's too much to start looking at just simple, and it's for the people, it's for us who live here too. It's as we walk through town, making sure things on Oak Street, by the Carnegie Building, are sharp, and things on Railroad and in Money Way. If we can just put some effort into that, I think it'll be a good thing for visitors and people who live here.
I guess my concern here is that we're perhaps putting more on you than is really realistic with all three of these, and possibly from what I hear in the discussion, that Money Way is a higher priority due to the bathrooms and the street and the sidewalk improvements than on Main Street than Railroad Avenue and Oak Avenue at this point.
I think this is I think Paul makes a really good point about what's going to happen when the sidewalk program starts, and it might benefit us to check with those merchants and see how many of them are interested in some design or help to use their back door. I know I've heard from some of them that because of the nature of their business, they don't really want people coming in that direction. And if we could just do a little evaluation of that objective and see how important that is, if there's not that many people interested in it, maybe this becomes more of a midterm.
I think this is a really important early conversation with the firm that we bring in. I mean, I've worked in a historic town that did sidewalk in about 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, in and out. We didn't replace laterals, but we did not have street trees creating problems next to gas lines. And I think the trees do introduce a complexity here that's going to be difficult. And to the extent we can take on those unique challenges early because of the flexibility of our sidewalk design today, I think we should consider how we do that. And there'll be individual conversations to have with each individual property owner. And that's a challenge also, just making sure that we have those conversations. But these are sensitivities, and they may have some ideas on, are they flexible? Is it something they've done before, where if we have interest in potential streetscape improvements to 3 different corridors, phasing those discussions so that you have a concept with one, and then you eventually move to the second, and eventually move to the third? Or is it better to take them all on at one time? So I think those are considerations that we would want to talk to the firm about right away.
I think a lot of these projects individually, we're going to have to look at them as phased projects. There's going to be a lot of discussion ahead of time, and then a lot of the actual work is probably going to be phased. Not going to accomplish it all at once.
So what's your preference on which category to place this
I think you should give us a recommendation, Mark.
Okay, so we'll bring
that's
you...
a staff time issue.
Okay, we'll bring you some ideas on that one.
Well, in terms of time, I mean, I trust your judgment on that, where it should go.
I think we can have these conversations in the same... I think there's some economies of scale that will happen with the workshops, where we'll be able to have a conversation about Main Street and distinguish that from some of the other corridors, and then touch on what type of streetscape amenities make sense. Our benches, or maybe elements of the streetscape that might be recommended to be replaced. Just an example, but these are parts of that conversation, and I think that a good facilitator can move through a number of these ideas fairly quickly and at the same time achieve consensus. But the community and the participants in that discussion will need to buy into the process, and then we'll have to all agree with whatever the outcome is, whatever the consensus seems to be pointing toward. So why don't we put that in near term for right now, and then we'll figure out perhaps a different way of describing the process there.
And one way I just want to quickly mention... Yeah, it'll be quick, but I just want to mention that if we think about it like restoring a vintage automobile, that what we're trying to do, in my opinion, is take something that's fantastic and wonderful and just bring it back to its best state. So we don't lose the soul of the town, but we're trying to refurbish things that need to be refurbished.
Of course, back behind some of those buildings in any of our lifetimes, it's never been nice.
Right. So it may be time for, some changes there. So
total changes.
So the final public infrastructure improvement is the rebuild on the City Hall parcel. And
6 months.
We're starting a conversation. You've actually started that conversation. You started it in November last year, and it went through more than a 6-month public engagement process. And we're bringing you next steps on Monday the 17th. So this conversation will begin now in September 2018, and obviously it will take a while before that's complete. And maybe even the word complete by a certain date is maybe not as good as begin by a certain date. So we'll think through how we organize this. I don't know that we need any additional feedback on that one.
Next.
It's both. It's really in all three. It's going to be an ongoing conversation. So we're moving to process now. And the first one relates to identifying community-supported uses permitted by right. And this is something that we're having conversations about now. and can be placed in the immediate term.
Yeah, the
in most
council,
cases.
The council may want to consider this as a two-step process. Obviously, you all should take credit for prioritizing a lot of these efforts with your goal setting, and so city staff has responded and moved forward on trying to make some of these changes. However, CEQA is a limiting factor in the scope of some of the land use policy changes that can be made until the general plan is adopted that we can lean on. So you will be having some items brought before you at the next meeting regarding some process change recommendations from the Planning Commission. And then the following meeting, I think that's October 9th, we will have a discussion on uses, which the Planning Commission just wrapped up at their last meeting. At that time, we will be asking you to take action on an ordinance to make some of these process and policy decisions, but also we'll be looking for input that we can use to build the next round of these, because even if you prioritized some of the broader, very far-reaching goals that I think some of the council members have, it would trigger a significant CEQA analysis that will have to be built into the time frame. So just please understand that. So I think now planning staff would recommend that this go in both the short and medium term, and then you continue to provide ongoing input as we bring these items before you, in addition to working with the council subcommittee on prioritizing kind of the breadth and scope of some of the bigger ideas as we get some more of the CEQA work wrapped up in the general plan.
Great.
Okay, the next one is streamlining the permit process by discontinuing the discretionary review for certain permit types. That's also actively moving near immediate.
To me, that seems like it needs more thought. It seems more like an intermediate thing. Exactly what are we trying to accomplish? Are we going to talk about maybe amortizing away some of these permits that run with the land? I mean, it's, I don't know. I think 6 months seems pretty quick.
There are a couple that are in motion now, right? Then those are coming on the 25th. That is awnings and signs. And perhaps those are two that can go now, and others can be a little bit later.
Well, and adding to that, October 9th, we will be bringing you, from the staff perspective, what are some benign discrepancy reductions, so to speak. The clothing store is the example we've been using. That will allow staff to kind of take the council's temperature on the scope and interest at that time. The Planning Commission was nearly unanimous in their support of most of the changes that were recommended by staff. There were a few individual concerns identified, which staff will present, but that'll allow the council to kind of see some of the things that staff has recommended and the commission's recommended under the current CEQA work that's been done, and then also, as I mentioned, allow some bigger picture priorities to be provided that we can continue to work on.
I think the other opportunity here is to connect the Kosmont team with the planning department and look at look at their array of options and integrate that into a future staff report to give you some things to think about if there are other opportunities for low-hanging fruit.
I think part of this whole zoning process is the first thing that's listed under people, which is reimagine underutilized properties and promote infill housing. And I would hope that as we're doing the zoning, maybe in the middle section or the end section, we really take a good look at what we can do to incentivize development through some types of bonuses or whatever that might be available if you're building near transit, and maybe consider widening the width of our commercial district so that it goes out further, and we capture more property that would have a commercial value to it. So I realize we wouldn't build all this stuff within this time frame, but I think it needs to be considered when we're looking at the zoning ordinance.
So we were, I think, talking about either immediate or near term for this.
I would put it in the middle section.
Near term.
If we're actually going to get into a sort of meaty discussion about the zoning ordinance, whenever that is falling in this thing, I think this should be part of it.
And so just know some of these are moving now for you. The permit, the awnings, and the signs will be coming to you next week, 2 weeks from now. And
thinking of things that are, have more of an impact on people's decisions to build or to lease to somebody, or, you know.
Okay. And then the final item under process is the pop-up retail use policy.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that we should move fairly promptly on that one.
And I've got a couple comments on that. One other thought is that, so we've got these assets in the RLS Museum, the Wine Library, the Historical Society, and also the Napa Valley Museum brought up that they have the Julia Child exhibit that's in storage now. The Napa Valley Museum is working, I think, with Napa to think about a pop-up thing down there. So is that another aspect that not just retail, but maybe one of the historical museum elements that we have might work? And then another kind of related thing was that if we do have businesses or needs, we'll need to think about staffing. We know that there's an issue with that now. Maybe infill housing down the road helps with that. But somebody suggested discussing with PUC College in Angwin, recruiting folks to help work, and they said that possibly it's just a matter of being able to provide the transportation, some kind of mechanism, so that if we are looking for people to work in St. Helena and have some sort of outreach that we can help them be here, that may help as we're looking at pop-up opportunities. We also have to think about who's going to be working there. But I'm for moving forward quickly on this.
And I think we will need to look at partnerships with organizations like the Historical Society or others that can help us with pop-up concepts, particularly in that cultural arena.
Yeah.
So we'll move that to the immediate category, and then we'll move on to people. The reimagine underutilized properties and promote infill housing really starts with an identification of ways that we can incentivize that. Some of the ideas that you come up with will take a little time to implement, but getting that started is something that
it's not in the first 6-month category, but I think it is part of the zoning work, which is shouldn't be happening in isolation from that.
And we have the housing strategy coming up in October, November. So to me, that seems like that will get that ball rolling there as well.
Okay to put it in a medium term?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. If that's realistic.
The community event programming is the next item.
Already
I'm sorry, did I
implementing.
miss one? No, that's right.
I'd like to see that, more of that sooner, and then I like the idea that what the chamber's doing, and then we as a city are also taking responsibility for marketing, so we're a participant and not just handing it off, but are participating in it, and I think that'll let the community and the businesses, as Susan, I don't know if she's still here, but she brought that up, that if we're all kind of working at it together, we're making sure it's getting done in the way that we all want it to be done. So,
Well, what I'm understanding here is that the motivation here is largely coming from the chamber, and the city will need to support that.
I think the observation is that the Kosmont team, when they took a look at the community, they observed that there are not a lot of events that either are recurring or assist the merchants in the months that are a little more difficult. Mm-hmm. And they've raised the question: are there ways that the city can work with the chamber to create something like that, something that will bring people downtown during slower months, or on a recurring basis?
And I think, something like this is immediate. You're already working with them on the Christmas program.
Right.
We're going to have a potluck next week.
The potluck's a good idea. Is a starting point. The Jingle All the Way, which you'll hear more about on the 25th, is really the first event programming that will be coming out of these discussions. And I've had some other conversations with the leadership of the chamber about other events that could be very interesting and exciting for the community.
Well, I think we're all in agreement then that this is a higher priority.
Okay. The online marketing portal, I would recommend you add that also to the immediate, and
Yes,
it can be
absolutely.
built very quickly.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a way that we can also bring awareness to some of our vacant spaces.
Good.
Okay.
And then in terms of the technical assistance, I'm sorry.
Did we?
Oh, did I skip that one? I'm sorry. Refreshing branding and reputation of downtown.
Well, that's something that we're constantly working at.
Yeah.
I think we need to tackle it in a new way. This is where I see, some professional marketing, design, reimagining, creating some kind of uniform message and program that infects everything we're doing. I don't see this as something that the city and the chamber should think up. I think we should have some people who are real idea design kind of people come in here and get to know the town and tell us what they think we should do.
Is this beyond the capacity of Kosmont companies to help us here?
I think it's a different type of firm. So you're looking for an advertising type firm, marketing firm, a number of good companies out there that can come up with some creative ideas. I think also we will want to connect them to the Visit Napa Valley Tourism Improvement District.
Yeah.
And figure out ways that those resources can potentially help to deliver some of this work and not overlook the branding that's also needed for St. Helena beyond just Visit Napa Valley, but how does that branding also make sure that it captures the different communities within the valley, and not see us get lost in that overall marketing.
And one thing I will mention, though, on that is that as we consider marketing, we also have to consider the impacts of that, of what we're bringing in. I mean, this is just one thing that goes back to the Visit Napa Valley model that I've been just, talking about for a number of years, is that if the money is just going to bringing people in, I just want to make sure we're also looking at how do we manage those impacts, so that it's a dual kind of look at how this works, so that it's a balanced approach.
And I think the feedback from the Visit Napa Valley representatives is that those that are staying overnight tend to invest more in the merchants and their experience as opposed to the day tripper, which creates a lot of traffic. The alternative is someone that generally has less of an impact, but also leaves a financial impact on the community.
I think we're turning this into too much of an advertising campaign as opposed to remaking the image of St. Helena in the minds of business people who might want to come here. This is at least what I'm hearing from some of the business people, that we're going to start changing some of our processes. It's not just come and visit. It's getting the message out about what we're doing. The sidewalk program is coming, and kind of connecting with people in a way that we haven't. And
that's what's nice about this online portal, for example. This document, when we finish this in 2 weeks, it's going to be loaded onto that website. And we'll be able to highlight initiatives that are coming and put some timelines on there, and it'll be an opportunity to share with the investors. But I think the distinction is important here. This branding and reputation of downtown can be directed in two different ways, right? It can be directed to the potential businesses, or it could be directed to the potential customers.
I think it has to be both.
I think it's a message of what the city is.
Well, it's both. It's both to promote the businesses and also to promote the customers that need to come and follow those businesses.
And the right type of customer. That's really what Visit Napa Valley is.
I think it's also just promoting the city and what makes St. Helena different. That people are always saying, they're doing this in Yountville, and Yountville has their own reputation. But I feel like we are kind of the authentic, real city up here, up valley, and it's something that we could promote. But I do think it's more than inviting people to come. I think it's inviting business and telling them why and what we're doing and why it would make a difference, and that, they should take a look at St. Helena.
I agree.
And I can imagine that when we bring on when we're in the process of considering options, you will be able to speak with the prospective firms about this, how do you address the challenge of communicating with the potential businesses that might want to open here, and some of those people may be living in the community already, and others that might want to visit. How do we address both that communication challenge? And so I'm sure that the firms would have ideas that address both types of considerations. And if I'm hearing the council correctly, we see this as something that might want to start earlier rather than later.
Yeah, I think so.
And so I think this is one of those initiatives that we will need to commit resources to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll need to build a little bit of a strategy on how we do that internally and recommend that to you. So I think we're jumping down to technical assistance to businesses and landlords. That contract was approved tonight with Kosmont, and we can begin to talk to them about building a curriculum that can be communicated. I think the sooner we are able to help in that capacity, and I think also ask the question, how can we help you with the business community, that the curriculum can be tailored to the needs of the businesses. And so we can begin that conversation at 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in Long Beach, where I have a meeting set up.
Are you going?
I'll be there. I have to pack.
Okay, the next item, we have 4 more to go. So the first one here is the wine train pilot project. Haven't talked to them yet about this, so this would need to start with a conversation. The question is, at what time frame?
You mentioned a pilot
Yesterday.
program. Maybe they would do something for our winter event. Maybe they would have a train that came up here, and first of all, it would lessen the traffic that's going to be pouring into town for our winter event. But bring a train up here. People could have dinner or something. Go to the winter thing, or come in the afternoon, and they could shop first. That might be a good pilot project.
Yeah.
And
I think we should start a conversation with them as soon as possible, and see what they could do.
Yeah, I'm certainly.
It may be that they may have to do a little bit of infrastructure on their property to allow the people off, and then some kind of pathway to be able to get to our
Yeah, they're letting
streets.
people off right now,
I know,
and they're
but
putting them on buses. It's not the greatest thing.
But they need to have something that's a little bit more permanent, or at least safe, to be able to get to our sidewalks that are not safe.
Where they can trip.
I think looking at that as soon, I think we're hearing from the merchants that this is, at least I am, that this is something they'd like to see. I like the idea that it's a pilot program, that we're testing and seeing how it goes, and if we have a conversation, then we can see what they think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm certainly willing to participate in such a conversation. I've had conversations in the past with senior officers there addressing this issue. It's not necessarily as facile as one might think, but it's worth the conversation for sure.
Sure. Okay.
One of the merchants mentioned to me that, you might want to, I don't know if we work with the chamber or the individual merchants, some kind of promotional 10% off thing or something to allow people, encourage them to shop, get off the train, shop. So that they may be interested in that program. Some of the merchants may not, but I just wanted to put it out there.
Okay. Hotel considerations.
I think it goes in the first 6 months. My view is that there's been a lot of discussion about this in the SHAPE committee, and we shouldn't drop the ball. A lot of pro and con, and I think what we really need is a good look at potential sites, and what is their, how do they rank or stack up in terms of revenue to the city, both long-term and property that we might sell, whether it's railroad or part of Adams. I can say from the SHAPE process, I think a lot of the community that was initially very opposed to the hotel on Adams, a lot of it had to do with the process. And by going through the SHAPE process, there's several people who came around to the idea that some preservation of public open space over there would be acceptable with a hotel. And so I think this would be something I would put under the Kosmont contract to give us an analysis, some real information.
And that's what's recommended in your staff report for the 17th, is that we, with the contract that was approved tonight, that one of their tasks is to study the Adams Street parcel as well as the City Hall parcel.
Yeah, I strongly endorse what Ms. Goberstein says. Sure.
My thought on it is that there has to be some consideration of housing when we're talking about a large, commercial venture with its staffing needs. If we're getting out in front of ourselves, I'm just going to put this out there, that what happened in Santa Clara Valley, in Silicon Valley, was the approval of commercial businesses, many commercial businesses that were followed by the need for more housing, more gas stations, more supermarkets, and whatnot. So I do think that if we are looking at larger commercial uses, or even medium size, that as we look at that, we don't forget to look at the housing needs that will follow. So that's just where I would like to make sure that we're not separating the two, that as we look at that, we're also looking at this as well.
I tend to think of them a little differently. I almost think of this more as like a feasibility analysis. What is there a particular type of hotel that fits in with what we have, that is not taking away, cannibalizing other businesses? More of what fits, how many rooms, kind of more like a actual site analysis, so that you would know. Then from that, you would typically generate from the number of rooms the employees that might come with it later. But I think it would help inform some decisions we're looking at, like what are we going to do with the railroad property? What are we going to do, with Adams? And I think we need information.
Well, again, you're saying that the Kosmont companies can help us with this?
Right. So the vision is that they would study the parcels, and provide feedback to the city for additional thinking and consideration. I'm planning to meet with them tomorrow afternoon and talk a little bit about framing that scope of work.
Okay, good.
So I think the feedback is immediate.
Mm-hmm.
Within 6 months, start that conversation. In terms of parklets, this is again something that probably can be replicated pretty quickly, and would benefit from a discussion at the Planning Commission before bringing it to council.
I think there needs to be a discussion with Caltrans in terms of Main Street as well.
We would have to consider that.
I think it also relates, though, to the Money Way railroad thing. It is noisy sitting out or being on Route 29, and to the extent that we can use our buildings as a sound buffer and start to create places over on Railroad or Money Way, maybe some of these parklets would appear over there.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's something that we can begin to work on and do fairly quickly when we do it. I don't think it'll be a heavy lift for us. It's just a matter of looking at a few very good policies. I think this is the item you were looking for examples right away, right? So we'll put together a few links for you to send out some information on these. And I think if we put this in the immediate, it may not be the first 2 months. It may be near the end of the immediate, but we can get it going. And then the final one can really fit in all three categories. There's work that's happening tomorrow. There's work that needs to continue to happen through the project.
Okay, very good.
One more.
We have another item to go.
So moved.
Thank you very much. It's really a terrific presentation that you put together, and it's wonderful to see the community as enthusiastic about it as possible. But at the same time, I think we all understand, too, that one way or the other, if we're going to be sustainable, we have to generate more foot traffic that stays longer here in St. Helena and helps our shops. So I'm especially pleased with the comments about taking a further look at hotels. Thank you. All right, let's go to 10.3, which is Mr. Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So, quick overview. As you know, the wastewater treatment plant and its discharge are regulated and permitted through the State Water Board. The reclamation is monitored and regulates effluent as it's applied to land, and the updated MPDS permit it regulates the discharge to the Napa River. So in 2016, the 2016 update to the MPDS permit had some more stringent regulations and effluent limits. As a result of that, it was determined that the existing condition of the wastewater treatment plant could not meet those more stringent requirements, and that was based on some historical data and analytics that we had gathered. So, as a result of that, the state then issued the CDO, which also included a timeline for the city to comply with the
CDO being cease and desist.
Cease and desist order. Yes, thank you. So, as a result of the CDO, the city did do many studies, including a groundwater study and the more recent feasibility study. In the final feasibility study, it was delivered to the state. They did accept the findings and they approved it. They commended the city on the work that we've done, and that is included as attachment 2. It's rather lengthy. But in that, in the feasibility study prepared by GHD, they were evaluated. We evaluated the alternative studies, and through that, we have identified 2 alternatives that were evaluated more lengthy by GHD. The first alternative would be to construct a wetlands with an infiltration pond, and the second alternative would be a trickling filter system with infiltration pond. Additionally to that, staff recommended some other projects that would support the Phase 1 upgrades. Those projects being tertiary filtration, electrical upgrades, infiltration pond, and a disinfection system. And a summary of those projects will be presented below. I can get into each one if you'd like. No, it's rather lengthy. But we have outlined each project, also with where staff recommends the trickling filter alternative. We go through the tertiary filtration. We've outlined the pages where the information can be found, as well as electrical upgrades, infiltration pond, and disinfection system. So the next step in the process is for city staff to receive expert assistance and to provide services for design for these projects. And the staff are recommending GHD. GHD staff are here tonight to answer questions towards the end, and I will also answer any questions you may have. In the fiscal impact, total cost for project S52, the Phase 1 upgrades listed above, estimated to be $12 million, which is inclusive of the remaining design costs of $1.4 million. Funds for the design costs are available in the adopted 1819 Capital Improvement Program for Phase upgrades, electrical upgrades, infiltration pond, and the disinfection system. I want to make a note that in those preliminary numbers, it does include a 30% contingency, which is rather conservative. Additionally, construction costs are in the preliminary phase at the feasibility level, totaling $14.1 million for all the projects combined. As the project design progresses and construction costs are refined, we will bring those costs back to council, as well as identifying some other funding opportunities. Staff have initiated the process of applying for loan funding with the USDA. It's a 40-year term. Current rate is 3.875. So staff recommends, in order to meet the St. Helena Wastewater Treatment Reclamation Plant groundwater investigation cease and desist order, revised compliance schedule, and based on the findings of the 2017, August of 2017 final feasibility study, and in an effort to utilize the existing land with the spray field, that we recommend council provide direction to negotiate a contract with GHD for the design of Alternative 2, Trickling Filter with bypass flow and settling tank in Configuration 4, Tertiary Filtration, Infiltration Storage Pond, Disinfection System Upgrade, Electrical System Upgrade, Reclamation Field Improvements, and accept the City of St. Helena Wastewater Treatment and Reclamation Plant Improvement Feasibility Study. Additionally, recommend for the Phase 1 wastewater treatment plant improvements to move forward. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know there's a lot of information involved with the feasibility study and in this report, so we can dig into it and start answering questions.
Just a broad question. Are these improvements all to be done within the current 5 years of the current rates for wastewater?
I'm gonna defer to April on this if they're all covered in the rate study.
Not whether they're covered, but whether they have to be accomplished within the period of the current rate study.
I do not know the construction timeline, so that's something Felix could speak to. There are several of the projects that are in this report that were not budgeted projects, so they are currently not budgeted. We will be bringing, once we have final, more solidified construction contracts, back to City Council for recommendations, different funding alternatives. The term cash in there is cash that we have from operations that we can transfer over from the current rates, cash we currently have in the CIP projects. We also know that there is an item that's going up for vote in November that could potentially open up additional funding for grants for the tertiary treatment. We have checked our impact fees for the wastewater fund. We can use 100% of our impact fees for tertiary treatment. Although the tertiary is showing up, I believe it was $1.4 million. We have about $700,000 in there. So I've been working with Felix and with Erica and with Mark on various funding strategies to be able to try to implement as much as we can on this. I hope that answers your question.
Well, one more follow-up here. Again, with respect to the tertiary treatment, I have some recollection that we were to study the cost of that under the cease and desist order, but that at least at the time of the cease and desist order, we were not necessarily being required to go to tertiary treatment. Has the regulatory environment changed there, where they now want us to accomplish tertiary treatment within? Again, this is coming sort of within the time frame of the rate study, which is what's concerning me is that we may be looking at a considerable costs that one way or the other aren't included in the current rate study.
The tertiary treatment is part of the CDO in that. When we received the response from the regional board, it's included in attachment 3. They are going to require some nitrate limitations. Now, they weren't ready to say what they would be. I believe they said it was a 10 would be the maximum, and so that would mean that the tertiary filtration also denitrifies, so it removes the nitrogen out of the water for the effluent, which is a concern because that was one of the main complaints from our neighbors, is that we were putting nutrients into the ground, and then those nutrients were traveling into the water table and affecting their crops. And I can have GHD speak further to that if you'd like.
Okay.
I wanted to just quickly mention, in terms of funding, there's a funding strategy that the city of Pleasanton used when they built their tertiary system, and they went out to their large users, and they worked with the large users as partners, and then went to the state and federal agencies to get the grants and low-interest loans to build a system. So I think there are creative ways to look at how we fund, and to me, building a system that's as comprehensive as we can, that includes all of our water partners. I'm hoping that we're looking at a system that is scalable, in a sense that we do what we can, but we're also looking to how can we keep increasing it to pull as much in as we can.
Just one other comment here with respect to the BOD and TSS. My understanding is that what's being required of us in the CDO is no different from what is being required of other folks that have similar type plants by the regional board. Is that right?
That's correct. The regional board is coming back and evaluating permits. They do it on a 5-year cycle. But anytime anytime you do anything to a wastewater treatment plant, they're going to look at your permit, and they may, and especially if you're making some kind of process adjustments. In this particular case, because the existing facility wasn't meeting the discharge limitations, that's how they came about, and through some complaints from neighbors about nutrients being getting put in the groundwater.
I think we might have...
Just a minute, please. Is there any other initial comment from council? Any public comment? Ms. Dell, did you have public comment?
I'm just tired of sitting. I'm very interested in this. I'm trying to hear. So.
Okay. Any other public comment? All right. I'll close public comment. Let me go back to Ms. Mitz for just a moment. What I'm understanding is that we've got $12 million for phase one, maybe $14.1 million when it's all combined, and then finance has to come up with a financial plan. And what we're hopeful, but is that the revenues from the recent rate increase on the wastewater side will finance this or come close to financing this. Is that where we are at this point in time, roughly?
With the increased costs with the unbudgeted projects, the current rate structure would not support that. However, there are adjustments that can be made within the CIP project. For instance, the reclamation field upgrades. Initially, when we first did the rate study, I believe it was in there for about $200,000. It was increased based on recommendations to about 1.4. After talking with Felix, pretty confident probably about the $300,000, $400,000 mark.
Okay.
So there are different financial strategies that we will definitely work with. As he mentioned, we are already started the process with the USDA loans. The USDA loan rates are lower than bond rates or the traditional lending, which is initially what we were looking at. We are very lucky in St. Helena because of the size of our city. We can qualify for USDA, and I've also talked to Ken Deeker about this, municipal finance advisor, and he said definitely that's the way to go on it. City Council direction at the time the rates were adopted to go to 30-year loans. USDA does allow for 40-year loans. That's going to be a council decision. So once we have more solidified project costs, that's when we plan on coming back with a more sound financial strategy to fund the projects.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from council? What is the action that we need to do tonight?
We're seeking direction to move forward with design, which design costs are covered.
So the way I see it is that I'm ready to move the recommendation as from staff, which includes all of this. So
I'm prepared to second it. Roll call, please.
Well,
is there any further council discussion? Did you?
Just for the public's edification, we are here working with this company, and we're not going to do a bidding process. We're not seeking other proposals from other companies. Can you speak to that issue? And then secondarily, who in our Public Works Department will be primarily responsible for negotiating the contract?
The first part of that is we did consider that, but we have the CDO, the schedule that we have to meet. So, and in looking at that and going out RFP and bringing in another consultant would be extend that time. Potentially, we would not meet the CDO deadlines. Further to that is that GHC has worked with the city extensively on this project through the feasibility study, the groundwater fate modeling study. They're very familiar with it, and I believe that keeping them on for this project is going to very much is going to streamline it and potentially save some money in the design phase because they're already up to speed on what we're doing.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think the staff recommendation makes a ton of sense. So, roll call, please.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Moving on.
Didn't know it was going to happen, to be honest with you. You were going to say go for it. Just
Okay.
talking outside of this. Good thing too, because I was getting tired. Yeah. So I got up too early. And I got to get up early. Well, tomorrow I'm coming early tomorrow. But.
Okay. Enjoy the conference. Learn a lot.
You gotta go home and get ready. I'll be back before I know it.
Well, I don't know. It's so fun because I heard there was another storm.
Public's supposed to read all the backup. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Cool. Good job. We can do it.